Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Before you drift off, I thought it would be a nice idea if you can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. I was out with friends at night, just drinks and talking, nothing crazy. It wasn't too late, but the streets were quiet when I left the bar. I pulled out my phone to call a rideshare, but my battery was low, barely hanging on at 5%. I figured I'd just grab a cab instead. There were always taxis in this part of town. It didn't take long. One rolled up, the old-fashioned kind, yellow with a lit-up sign on top. The driver leaned over and asked where I was headed. He had this blank expression, not unfriendly, but not welcoming either. I gave him my address, and he just nodded. I got in, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not bad, just weird. Like air freshener, but too much of it, like he was trying to cover something up. The seats were cracked leather, sticky against my legs. I glanced at the meter, but it wasn't running. I almost said something, but before I could, he reached over and hit the lock button. The doors clunked shut. I told myself it was normal. Maybe a safety thing. I tried not to overthink it. We drove for a bit, and I was staring out the window, half distracted, when I realized something was wrong. He wasn't taking the usual route. I knew this area. I'd lived here for years. But he'd skipped a turn, then another. My stomach tightened. "Hey," I said, leaning forward. "I think you missed a turn back there." No reaction. He just kept driving. I felt something cold creep up my spine. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Excuse me," I said, "I think you." Then he hit the gas. The car lurched forward, throwing me back against the seat. I grabbed onto the door handle out of instinct, but it wouldn't budge. I slammed my fist against the window. "Stop the car." My voice came out too high, too panicked. Nothing. He didn't even flinch. I fumbled for my phone, but when I clicked the screen, it was dead. Completely black. I swore under my breath and shoved it back in my bag. The streets outside blurred past, turning unfamiliar. We weren't in the city anymore. The buildings had thinned out, replaced by empty lots and rundown houses with dark windows. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I forced myself to breathe. Stay calm. I needed to get out, but the child locks were on. The partition between the front and back was solid, no way to reach through. I glanced at his hands on the wheel, knuckles white. Think. I leaned forward slightly. "Please, I don't have any money. If this is about money, you can just let me out." He didn't look at me, just kept driving. My hands were sweating. I wiped them on my dress and tried to remember every self-defense tip I'd ever heard. Go for the eyes, the throat, the groin. But I didn't have a weapon. Nothing sharp. Just my bag, my keys. My keys. I reached into my purse, fingers closing around them. My house key was small, but my car key was longer, sharper. I gripped it between my fingers like I'd seen in those self-defense videos. The car slowed down slightly as we hit a rough patch of road. I used that moment. I threw myself forward, reaching through the gap in the seats and jamming the key into the side of his neck. He made a noise, this horrible, guttural sound, and the car swerved. I felt the impact before I registered what was happening. The car slammed into something, jerking sideways. My head hit the window, hard. Pain shot through my skull. Everything spun. The next thing I knew, the car was still. The engine was still humming, but the front was crumpled against a tree. The driver was slumped over, his hand weakly grasping at his neck where blood seeped through his fingers. I didn't think. I just moved. I unlocked the door and shoved it open. My legs were shaking as I stumbled out onto the pavement. The air was cold, sharp against my face. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Behind me, I heard him groan. I ran. I didn't stop to look back. I ran down the empty road, my lungs burning, my ears straining for the sound of footsteps behind me. But there was nothing. Just the wind, the distant hum of the city somewhere far away. I ran until I saw headlights, until I nearly collapsed into the middle of the road, waving my arms like a lunatic. The car stopped. A woman rolled down the window, her face shifting from annoyance to concern the second she saw me. I don't remember what I said. I don't remember how I sounded. But she let me in, and she drove me straight to the nearest police station. They found the cab later that night. Empty. The driver was gone. There was blood on the seat, on the steering wheel, on the cracked leather. But they never found him. I moved into the apartment at the end of November. It was a small building, only 6 units, and kind of old, but it was cheap and close to work. The landlord was an older guy named Mr. Delaney. He seemed normal enough, a little stiff, not the type to chat much. He handed me the keys, went over the basics, and then, as he was about to leave, he stopped and pointed toward the basement door at the end of the hall. "That stays locked," he said. "Tenants don't go down there." I waited for an explanation, but he just stood there, like that was all there was to say. "Why?" I asked. "Nothing down there for you." Then he turned and left. At first, I didn't think much of it. I had no reason to go down there anyway. The laundry was in a separate room on the first floor, and there was nothing in the lease about storage. I figured it was just an old building, think bad wiring, unsafe steps, maybe rats. Landlords get weird about that stuff sometimes. A few weeks passed, and I settled in. It was quiet, mostly older tenants who kept to themselves. The walls were thin, though. I could hear the woman next door watching game shows in the evening and the guy across the hall coughing at night. Normal apartment sounds. Until I started hearing the banging. It was late, past midnight. I had just gotten into bed when it started, deep, heavy thuds coming from below. Not pipes. Not the old building settling. It was deliberate. Rhythmic. A pounding, like something or someone was slamming against a door. I sat up and listened, waiting for it to stop, but it didn't. 3 bangs. A pause. 3 more. Over and over. I got up, walked to the hall, and stood by the basement door. The noise was definitely coming from down there. I put my hand against the wood. I don't know why, but I did. I could feel the vibrations through my fingertips. Then it stopped. I stood there for another minute, heart pounding, but there was nothing. Just silence. I went back to bed and told myself it was my imagination. The next morning, I saw Mr. Delaney in the lobby, checking the mail. I hesitated, then said, "Hey, I heard something last night." From the basement. He didn't look at me. Ignore it. I waited for more, but he just kept flipping through his envelopes like the conversation was over. That night, it happened again. Same time, same pattern. 3 bangs. A pause. 3 more. I sat up in bed, wide awake. My whole body was tense, every nerve telling me not to move, not to go near that door. But I did. I crept into the hallway and stood there, staring at the basement door. The air felt wrong, heavy. I reached out and wrapped my fingers around the doorknob. It was ice cold. The banging stopped. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe a minute. Maybe 5. I waited, breath held, listening. Then, just as I started to pull my hand away, bang! Right against the door. I jumped back so fast I nearly fell. My chest was heaving. I turned and ran back to my apartment, locking the door behind me. I barely slept that night. The next day, I cornered Mr. Delaney as he was coming out of one of the other apartments. I heard it again, I said. From the basement. He sighed, rubbing a hand down his face like he was tired. Just ignore it. Ignore what? My voice was sharper than I meant it to be. What's down there? He glanced toward the basement door. For the first time, I saw something in his face that almost looked like regret. But then it was gone, replaced by that same blank expression. You don't want to know, he said. Then he walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, waiting, listening. Hours passed. Nothing. And then, at exactly 2:13 a.m., the banging started again. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. I threw the blankets off and sat up. My hands were shaking. My mouth was dry. But this time, I wasn't just going to stand there. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and walked out into the hall. My footsteps felt too loud, like the whole building could hear me moving. When I reached the basement door, I stopped. The handle looked worn, like it had been gripped too many times by too many hands. I swallowed hard, then grabbed the key from the counter where Mr. Delaney had left it the day I moved in. I slid it into the lock. Turned it. The door clicked open. A rush of cold air hit me. The smell was awful, stale, damp, something else underneath it that I didn't want to name. The stairs stretched down into darkness. My phone's flashlight barely made a dent in the black. I stepped inside. The floor was concrete, cracked in places. The ceiling was low. The walls were lined with old shelves, covered in dust. But none of that was what made my stomach drop. In the center of the room was a door. Not a normal door. It was thick, metal, with a sliding bolt across the front. Scratches covered the surface, deep gouges in the paint. The air was heavier down here, like the walls were holding their breath. The banging had stopped. I took a step closer. My flashlight beam shook. The door was covered in marks, like someone had been clawing at it. I reached out, barely grazing my fingers over the bolt. Then, from the other side, a whisper. Not words. Just sound. Ragged, broken, too close to the door. I ran. I bolted up the stairs, slammed the basement door shut, and locked it. My whole body was shaking. I pressed my back against the wood, my breath coming too fast, too shallow. The whispering had stopped. I didn't sleep. I sat up until morning, waiting for something else to happen. But nothing did. At sunrise, I packed my bags. I didn't tell Mr. Delaney I was leaving. I didn't ask him what was behind that door. I just threw everything into my car and drove until the building was nothing but a dot in the rearview mirror. I never looked back. And I never heard the banging again. I had been looking for a new job for a while. My last one barely paid enough to cover rent, and I was desperate for something better. I applied to so many places that I lost track, so when I got an email inviting me for an interview, I didn't think much of it. It was for an administrative assistant position at some small firm I didn't remember applying to, but the pay was decent, and they wanted me to come in the next morning. The address they sent led me to an office building in a part of town I didn't know well. It wasn't run down or anything, just quiet. Too quiet. No traffic, no people walking around, just a row of mostly empty parking spots and a building with dark windows. I checked my phone for the email again, making sure I had the right place. Suite 403. The lobby was empty when I stepped inside. No receptionist, no security, just the low hum of the lights. There was a directory on the wall, but I didn't see the company name listed. My stomach felt a little weird about that, but I told myself maybe they were new. Startups pop up all the time, right? I took the elevator up to the 4th floor. The doors opened to a dimly lit hallway. Half the offices were empty, doors propped open to show dark rooms with no furniture inside. The carpet smelled like dust. At the end of the hall, I found Suite 403. The door was closed. I hesitated, then knocked. A few seconds passed before it opened. The man standing there was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. Thin, with a neatly trimmed beard and glasses. He was wearing a dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You must be Emily," he said. I nodded. "Come in." I stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was how bare the office was. No cubicles, no desks except for a single one against the far wall. No computers. Just a desk, a chair, and a filing cabinet. Something felt off. Before I could say anything, I heard the door click shut behind me. I turned and saw the man locking it. He slid the key into his pocket like it was nothing. My pulse picked up. He gestured to the chair in front of the desk. "Go ahead and sit down." I didn't move. I tried to keep my voice steady. "What kind of company is this again?" He smiled again, wider this time. "You applied, didn't you?" I couldn't remember. I had applied to so many jobs. I forced a laugh, trying to act normal. "I don't think I saw a company website." He didn't answer right away. Just walked to the desk, sat down, and folded his hands in front of him. "Tell me, Emily," he said, tilting his head slightly. "Does anyone know you're here?" My stomach dropped. I felt my fingers twitch. My bag was still on my shoulder. My phone was inside. I forced myself to smile. "Yeah, my boyfriend does." I didn't have a boyfriend, but he didn't know that. The man nodded slowly, like he was considering something. "That's good," he said. "That's smart." I swallowed hard. The air in the room felt too still. He tapped his fingers on the desk. "Let's begin the interview." I didn't sit down. My voice caught in my throat. I cleared it and forced myself to sound casual. "I actually need to use the restroom first." His expression didn't change. "There isn't one on this floor." That was a lie. I had passed one on the way in. I gripped the strap of my bag. "I think I left my phone in my car," I said quickly. "I should go grab it." His fingers stopped tapping. "You don't need your phone for an interview," he said. My legs felt stiff, but I took a step back. I'd feel more comfortable with it. He didn't move. Just sat there, watching me. Then he sighed, almost disappointed. "You should sit down, Emily." I turned and grabbed the doorknob, twisted it. It didn't budge. My chest tightened. Unlocked the door. He leaned back in his chair. "You came here voluntarily." My hands were sweating. I wiped them on my jeans. "Open the door." He sighed again and reached into his pocket. For a second, I thought he was going for the key, but instead, he pulled out his phone and set it on the desk. "I can call someone to let you out," he said. "But I think you should stay. Just for a little while." My breath was coming too fast. I forced myself to stay calm. Panicking wouldn't help. I glanced around the room. No windows. Only one exit. And him between me and the key. I shifted my weight like I was giving in. Like I was going to sit down. Then I moved fast. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, an empty glass from the desk, and threw it at him. He flinched just for a second, but it was enough. I lunged forward, shoving the desk hard, making the phone slide to the floor. He cursed, reaching for me, but I dodged. My fingers clawed at his pocket, grabbing the key. He grabbed my wrist. I screamed loud, sharp, desperate. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his face. Panic. He wasn't expecting that. I twisted hard, wrenching free, and shoved the key into the lock. My hands were shaking so bad I fumbled it twice before I finally got it open. I didn't look back. I ran. Down the hall, past the empty offices, slamming into the stairwell. My breath was ragged, my legs shaking, but I didn't stop until I was outside. I gasped in the cold air. The parking lot was still empty. I got into my car and locked the doors. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight they hurt. I looked back at the building. The fourth floor window was dark. No sign of him. I drove straight home. Later, when I calmed down enough to think, I searched for the company online. It didn't exist. The email was gone too. Deleted like it was never there. I don't know what would have happened if I had sat down. I don't think I ever want to know. I wasn't planning on posting this. Honestly, I'd rather just forget it ever happened, but the more I think about it, the more I feel like I need to tell someone. Maybe to make sense of it. Or to make sure it wasn't just me overthinking things. It started out as a regular drive. It was late, probably around midnight. I had been visiting some friends out of town and was on my way back home. The roads were empty, like you'd expect. It was just me, my car, and the occasional truck passing by. No big deal. I had been driving for a couple of hours already, and I was getting tired, but not enough to stop. I don't know, I just didn't want to deal with the hassle of pulling over, so I kept going. But then, I noticed it. A car. A dark sedan. It was a good distance behind me at first, far enough that I didn't think much of it. But after a while, I noticed that it seemed to be matching my speed. I'd speed up a little, and so would it. I'd slow down, and it did too. It was like it was always just far enough back that I couldn't see the driver. But it was definitely there. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, watching it. At first, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Just a coincidence. Maybe they were headed the same way as me. Maybe they just had the same schedule. But that thought didn't sit well with me. There was something about it that felt off. I took a look at the road signs and realized I was getting close to an exit. A long tunnel was coming up, and I figured I could use it to shake the car behind me. The tunnel was the kind that cut through the side of a mountain. Dark. No streetlights. No way for anyone to see anything except the headlights in front of them. I thought maybe if I took the exit, I could lose the car. The tunnel was long enough that there'd be no way for anyone to follow. So, I took the exit. It was a little sharp, and my tires squealed as I turned, but the sedan followed. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, and sure enough, it was still there. I started to get the feeling in my stomach like something wasn't right. The tunnel stretched out ahead of me, a dark mouth in the mountainside. The kind of place where if something were to happen, no one would hear you scream. I sped up. I figured if I pushed it, maybe I'd get ahead of the car. But it didn't matter. The sedan sped up too. It stayed right behind me. Not too close, but close enough that I could see the outline of its headlights in my mirror. The tunnel was getting darker the further I went in. The only light came from the headlights of my car and the one behind me. I tried to stay calm, telling myself that I was overreacting, that maybe the car was just passing through. But I couldn't shake the feeling. It was like I could feel the presence of whoever was in that car. Every time I glanced at the mirror, I couldn't see the driver's face. Just the headlights, always getting closer. The tunnel seemed to go on forever. It was one of those long, winding tunnels, the kind where you lose track of time. I had no idea how far in I was. My speedometer read close to 70 miles per hour. It was just me, the road, and that damn car behind me. I didn't want to do anything too drastic. I didn't want to overreact. So, I tried changing lanes, hoping to see if the car would pass me. But it didn't. It stayed right behind me. I tried moving over to the left lane, and the sedan did the same. Then to the right. Same thing. It followed me exactly. That's when I really started to panic. I couldn't figure out what was happening. Why was it following me? I glanced back in my mirror again. This time, I noticed something. The headlights were brighter now. Almost too bright. My rearview mirror was blinding me. I couldn't see the car's outline anymore. Just these lights. It didn't make sense. How could the car be that close? I turned my head quickly to check the road in front of me. That's when I saw something I wasn't expecting. Another car. A car that had pulled out from an entrance to the tunnel. The thing is, I didn't know that entrance was even there. I didn't know there was another road that led into it. It was only for a moment, just a flash, but I saw a second car behind me. Not the sedan anymore, but something else. I didn't even know how they had gotten there. I knew then that I was in trouble. There was no way that second car should have been in the tunnel. And it was right behind me now. I thought I was losing my mind. I slammed my foot on the gas, pushing my car harder. The tunnel curved, and I leaned into it, praying for a way out. The second car was still there, and now I could see that it wasn't just two headlights. There was a third light flashing, almost like an emergency light. The first car, the sedan, was getting closer too. Too close. I had no idea where they came from, or why they were following me. I had no choice. I had to get out of the tunnel. I kept pushing my car faster, but the two cars behind me stayed glued to my tail. It was like they knew exactly where I was going, every move I made. It wasn't just a random encounter anymore. And then, thank God, finally, I saw the exit. The tunnel was starting to open up, and I could see the lights from outside. I didn't care where it led. I just needed to get out. I floored it, my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel. I took the exit hard, just as the tunnel opened up behind me. The bright lights from the two cars were almost blinding now, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. I didn't want to know if they were still there. I couldn't risk it. The road led me to a small town. I drove through it quickly, passing empty streets and dimly lit houses. After what felt like an eternity, I slowed down. The adrenaline was wearing off, and I could finally think straight. I had no idea what had just happened. I didn't know who those people were, but they didn't follow me past the town. I didn't see them in my rearview mirror, and I didn't hear anything suspicious. I kept driving, not stopping until I got to my own neighborhood. To this day, I don't know who was in those cars, or what they wanted. All I know is that they never got close enough to make a move. They must have backed off when they saw me turning into the town. I never saw them again. I don't know if it was a coincidence or if they were following me on purpose, but it was the most terrifying experience I've ever had. I'm still not sure if I was just paranoid or if there really was something sinister happening that night. But I don't ever want to find out. It happened a few months ago, and I still can't stop thinking about it. I haven't told anyone about it, but the more I keep it in, the worse it feels. I don't know why I'm writing this now, maybe because I've been thinking about it more lately, or maybe because I just want to understand how it all happened. I still don't understand. One evening, I came home from work like any other day. I pulled into my driveway, got out of my car, and noticed a package sitting on my front porch. No big deal, really. I thought it was probably something I'd ordered or maybe something that had been left by mistake, but it wasn't from a company I recognized. It was just a plain, brown box. There was no name on it. No return address. No nothing. I didn't think much of it at first. I was tired, hungry, and just wanted to get inside, so I picked it up and took it with me. Inside, the box was packed with that crinkled brown paper, just the kind of stuff you expect to see in a box. But there was no padding, no extra protection for anything inside. It was just one item, a photograph. At first, I didn't think much of it. I pulled the photo out and looked at it, expecting it to be some random picture. But when I saw what it was, I froze. The picture was taken through my living room window. It was a shot of my couch, the corner where I usually sit, with the window clearly in the background. The thing that made my stomach drop was that it wasn't just a picture of my house. It was a picture of me. I was sitting on that couch, but I didn't remember anyone being there. I didn't remember seeing anyone outside my window at all. The photograph was taken during the day, and I was sitting with my back to the window, completely unaware that someone was watching me. I'm not sure how long I stood there staring at that photo, but when I finally looked up, my heart was pounding in my chest. I don't know what I was expecting to see, but I looked out the window anyway. Of course, no one was there. The street outside my house was empty. It was just a quiet neighborhood. Nothing out of the ordinary. But that photo, it felt like someone had been standing right there, right on the other side of the glass, watching me. I didn't know what to do. I started looking through the box again, thinking maybe there was something else in there. Something that could explain it. But there was nothing. Just that photo. Nothing else. No note, no explanation, just that single image. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been in my yard. That someone had taken the time to get a picture of me without me noticing. I didn't think it was a prank or some sick joke. It felt too real for that. And that's what scared me the most. It didn't feel like a joke. It felt like someone had been watching me for days, maybe longer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept the photo next to me on my bed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw me sitting on my couch, not knowing I was being watched. I kept thinking, what if they came back? What if they were still watching me? I didn't call the police. I didn't know what to tell them. Someone sent me a photo of myself. I couldn't imagine how they'd react. It felt too strange, too surreal to even explain. For the next few days, I stayed alert. I started locking the doors even when I was inside. I kept my curtains drawn. I didn't want to risk being watched again. I felt paranoid, but at the same time, I felt like I had every right to be. The next few days went by, and I didn't get any more strange packages, but I couldn't relax. I kept looking out my windows, thinking I saw movement outside, but when I checked, there was nothing. It was like I was living in constant fear of someone being just out of sight. The worst part? I couldn't shake the thought that they knew my routine now. They knew exactly where I'd be at any given time. How long had they been watching me? What else had they seen? I started taking a different route to work, just in case. I didn't want to be predictable. I didn't want to give whoever this was any advantage. Every time I walked into my house, I felt like something was wrong. It wasn't the house itself, but the idea that someone had been there. That someone had seen me in my own space. One morning, almost a week after receiving the package, I was standing in my kitchen, drinking my coffee. The sun had just come up, and the light was still soft. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular, just zoning out, when I heard a sound. It wasn't loud, just a slight rustling, like something brushing against the window. I froze. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what it was at first. I thought maybe it was the wind, but then I heard it again. It wasn't the wind. It was someone or something pressing against the window. I moved quickly, my heart racing. I went to the window and pulled the curtain aside, expecting to see someone standing right there. But there was nothing. Just my front yard, empty and still. My eyes scanned the area. Nothing. But the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up, and my hands were shaking as I let the curtain fall back into place. I knew that sound. I knew it was real. Someone had been outside. I called the police that day. I had to. I couldn't pretend anymore. I told them everything, from the package to the photo to the sounds outside my window. They were kind, but they didn't seem to take it seriously. They told me there wasn't much they could do without any more evidence. They couldn't just patrol the neighborhood for no reason. They told me to keep my doors locked, and if I saw anything else suspicious, to call again. I didn't know what to expect after that, but I did my best to move on. I didn't stop looking out the window, but I tried to stop letting it control me. I couldn't live like that. A few weeks passed, and the feeling of being watched started to fade. But then, just last week, something else happened. I was getting my mail, and there was another envelope. This one was different, though. It wasn't a package, just a plain white envelope. I opened it and pulled out another photograph. This time, it was me again, but I was outside. I was getting into my car. The photo was taken from the sidewalk, and it was clear the person had been standing right there, just a few feet away from me. I haven't seen anyone since. I've been locking up my house even tighter, checking every corner. I haven't gotten another photo yet, but I don't feel safe. I don't think I will ever feel safe again. Whoever this is, they know me. They know my patterns. And I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending that I'm not being watched. I still don't know who's doing this. And I still don't know why. but every time I look out a window, I wonder if they're out there, waiting. It's hard to even write about this now. I've gone back and forth about whether or not I should tell anyone, but I think I need to get this out. Maybe by telling the story, I can make sense of what happened, or at least stop feeling like I'm losing my mind. It started out like any other camping trip. My friends and I decided to head out into the woods for the weekend, nothing too fancy. Just a few days away from the noise of the city, you know? The plan was to find a quiet spot, set up camp, and just enjoy the peace. We found a decent spot, not too far off the trail, but far enough that we wouldn't have to deal with too many other people. We spent the first day setting up the tent, gathering firewood, and just chatting around the campfire. Everything felt normal. Nothing strange. Nothing out of the ordinary. We went to bed that night around 11, after a few beers and some laughs. I remember the stars were especially bright that night. It felt like the kind of night you could sleep under the sky and not worry about anything. The next thing I remember is waking up early. It was still dark outside, just before dawn. I didn't think anything of it at first, but then I noticed something was wrong. My sleeping bag was cold. It was like I had woken up in the middle of the night and hadn't realized it. I sat up and looked around. My friends were still asleep in their bags, but something felt off. That's when I saw it. The first sign that something wasn't right. Our backpacks, which had been neatly placed by the entrance of the tent the night before, were all unzipped. And not just unzipped open wide, the contents spilling out onto the ground. Some of us had brought snacks and food for the weekend, and that's what caught my eye first. The bags of chips, granola bars, and a few cans of beans were gone. Empty wrappers and open cans were scattered around, but there was nothing left. It was like someone had come into our tent during the night, taken everything, and just left the trash behind. I thought it was a joke at first. Maybe one of my friends had done it as a prank. I mean, we were all in the same tent. We weren't that far from the trail. But then I looked closer. The bags weren't just opened, they were ransacked. It looked like someone had gone through everything, like they knew exactly where we kept things. The food was gone, but nothing else seemed disturbed. Just the food. I turned to my friends, nudging them awake. Hey, wake up. Something's wrong. They crockily sat up, rubbing their eyes. I showed them the bags, and their expressions shifted immediately from tired confusion to genuine concern. We all started talking at once, trying to make sense of it. No one had gotten up in the night. No one had heard anything. The bags had been fine when we went to sleep. I stepped out of the tent to get some air, thinking maybe I could clear my head. The cold morning air hit me, but it didn't help. As soon as I stepped outside, I felt like someone was watching me. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. But the woods were still. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees. That's when I saw the footprints. They were right there, just outside the tent. At first, I thought it was one of us walking around in the night, but these tracks weren't ours. They were clear in the mud, fresh from the night. The boots were big, heavy, and they seemed to go in a straight line, heading away from the camp. But here's the thing, there were no prints leading toward the tent. Only away from it. It didn't make sense. Whoever or whatever had taken our food didn't come from the direction of the woods. They hadn't approached our camp. They'd left. I called the others over, and we all just stared at the prints for a moment, trying to figure out what they meant. But there was nothing to figure out. They were there, and they were real. Someone had been right there, standing near our tent in the middle of the night, and we hadn't heard a thing. We tried to convince ourselves that it was just some other campers. Maybe someone passing through, maybe they'd made a mistake or were just being careless. But deep down, we knew it wasn't that simple. We weren't the only ones in the woods, sure. But the more I thought about it, the more the whole thing felt off. There was no way someone had taken our food, gone through our bags, and left without us noticing. It felt personal. And it felt wrong. We decided to follow the footprints, figuring they'd lead us somewhere that could explain it. Maybe it was just some dumb prank, or maybe someone had gotten lost and didn't know better. I don't know what we thought we'd find, but we didn't expect what came next. The footprints led us further into the woods, deeper than we planned on going. The trail was faint in some places, harder to follow in others, but we kept going, step by step, hoping we'd find some explanation. Then, we came across something I'll never forget. It was a small clearing, maybe 50 yards away from our camp. In the middle of the clearing was a pile of our food. The granola bars, the chips, the cans of beans, everything. It was scattered around like it had been thrown in a hurry, but it wasn't the sight of the food that made my stomach turn. It was the way it was arranged, like it had been placed there on purpose. But there was something even worse. Near the pile of food, there was something else. Something I still can't shake. A small, thin piece of rope was tied to a tree, dangling just above the ground. And on it, there was a single item. A water bottle, one of ours, hanging from the rope, swinging gently in the wind. We all stood there in silence for what felt like forever. No one said anything. No one moved. We just stared at that rope, the water bottle, and the pile of food. It was like something out of a nightmare. Why was it there? Who had done this? The air felt heavier now. We all agreed we'd had enough. No one was going to stay another night in those woods. Whatever had happened, whatever had taken our food and left that rope, we didn't want to stick around to find out. We turned around and made our way back to the camp, not speaking a word. When we got back to the tent, I don't know why, but I immediately started packing up. I didn't care about the mess, the food, or anything else. I just wanted to leave. We all packed up in a hurry, not even thinking about how we'd have to come back for the car later. We just had to get out. We didn't speak again until we were in the car, driving back down the road. Even then, it felt like we were all still too shaken to talk about it. The woods were quiet when we left, but there was something in the silence that I couldn't shake. I haven't been able to shake it since. I haven't told anyone else about this. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened, but I know one thing for sure. Someone was out there. Someone had been watching us, and they weren't done yet. I still don't know how to explain it. It's been weeks, and every time I think about it, my stomach churns. I can't stop wondering if I did something wrong or if I missed some sign that I should have paid attention to, but in the end, I just feel lucky. It happened one night, like any other. I'd been out late, working on a project, grabbing drinks with a few friends, nothing out of the ordinary. I'm not one to stay out too late, but that night I lost track of time. I didn't think anything of it as I pulled into my driveway and made my way up to the front door. I live in a small house. Nothing fancy, just a simple place I've had for a few years. It's in a quiet neighborhood, and I've always felt safe there. When I got to my front door, I took out my keys and unlocked it. No big deal. I had my hand on the knob when I noticed something strange. The door was already open, just a crack. I froze. I always made sure to double check my locks before leaving, and there was no way I had forgotten to shut the door when I left that evening. I hadn't been gone long, maybe 3 or 4 hours at most. But here I was, standing in front of my door, with it half open. It made no sense. I felt a tightness in my chest, but I told myself to calm down. I wasn't going to overreact. Maybe I just didn't close it properly. I stood there for a moment, listening. Everything was quiet. No sounds coming from inside. But I had this gnawing feeling. You know the one. The feeling you get when something's off, but you can't put your finger on it. I slowly pushed the door open the rest of the way, half expecting to find nothing. Just a normal, empty house. The light from the hallway spilled out, casting long shadows into the night. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the silence. No response. I stepped inside, still unsure of what I was doing. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. Maybe I left a window open? Maybe the wind had pushed the door a little? The more I thought about it, the more my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. I wasn't sure if I should go further in or just run back out and call someone. Then I heard a noise. Not a creak or a bump, but something more distinct. A faint shuffle, followed by the sound of something scraping against the floor. My heart jumped. I knew it wasn't the wind anymore. Someone was inside. I stood in the entryway, not moving, trying to figure out what to do. I wasn't carrying anything, no phone, no weapon. I could go back outside and call the police, but I didn't want to take my eyes off the hallway. I just wanted to make sure that whoever was in my house didn't hear me. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. A man. Standing in the kitchen doorway, about 10 feet away from me. He was holding a knife. My brain didn't fully register it at first. It was like the knife didn't belong, like it shouldn't be there. I just stared at him, frozen. I don't know how long we stood there, just looking at each other, neither one of us moving. But I could see it in his eyes, he was just as surprised as I was. For a split second, I thought maybe he was some sort of prankster, someone messing with me, but the look in his eyes told me he wasn't playing around. I could see his grip tightening around the knife, and my pulse spiked. My body went into overdrive, and I immediately felt the need to get out of there. But instead of moving, I found myself still just staring at him. I was trying to figure out what he was going to do next, what I should do next. I don't know why I didn't yell or run, maybe because I was so paralyzed with fear that I couldn't make myself move. My throat felt tight, and my legs wouldn't cooperate. Then he spoke. "What do you want?" His voice was low and shaky, like he wasn't sure of his own words. It was clear he didn't expect me to be there. I didn't answer him. I couldn't. My mind was spinning. Why was he in my house? Was he planning on robbing me? Was he just trying to scare me? But I couldn't just stay there, waiting for him to make the next move. My instincts kicked in. I slowly backed away, still facing him, not taking my eyes off that knife. I couldn't make a run for it. The only way out was through him, and I wasn't ready to take that chance. But I needed time to figure something out. Anything. Then, something happened. He stepped forward. The knife glinted in the light. His footfalls were soft on the carpet, but the sound was enough to make my heart skip. I could hear my own breath, fast and shallow. I was about to make a move, but then something stopped me. The look in his eyes, he wasn't focused on me. He wasn't looking at me like someone who was about to attack. He was looking past me, like he was considering his next move. I don't know why I thought of it in that moment, but I darted for the door. I wasn't going to give him the chance to close the distance between us. I had no idea what his intentions were, but I couldn't take the risk of finding out. I made a split-second decision. I sprinted for the door, ignoring everything else. I reached the hallway, turned, and grabbed the handle. The door was still wide open. I could feel him behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it, my hand shaking as I fumbled with the deadbolt. I could hear the sound of movement inside, footsteps, but I didn't dare wait around to see what he would do. My heart was thumping in my chest as I ran to my car, not looking back once. I started the engine as fast as I could and peeled out of the driveway, my headlights casting long shadows behind me. I don't know what happened after I left. I don't know if he followed me or if he stayed inside. But I didn't stop driving until I found a gas station about 10 miles away. I sat in my car for a long time, just staring at the road, trying to process what had happened. It didn't feel real. I called the police as soon as I had a signal, but when they arrived, there was nothing. No sign of anyone inside the house. No trace of a break-in. No fingerprints. No knife. The door was still locked, just like I left it. They didn't take it seriously at first. They thought maybe I had imagined the whole thing. But I knew what I saw. I knew the man had been there. I knew the knife was real. I went back the next day, and the house was exactly how I left it. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows. Nothing. It felt like nothing had happened at all. But I'll never forget the look on his face when he saw me standing there. He was just as shocked as I was, like neither of us was supposed to be in that house that night. I've since changed the locks, added cameras outside, and made sure to tell the neighbors to keep an eye out. But every time I walk through that door, I can't shake the feeling that I'm not alone. I went to the mall after work. I just wanted to grab a few things, nothing major. It wasn't crowded, which was nice. I liked shopping alone, taking my time. There was this store I always stopped by, one of those places that wasn't too expensive but had decent clothes. I picked out a few things and went to the fitting rooms in the back. There were only a few stalls. Just a short hallway, beige carpet, a big mirror on one wall. No other women were around, just the girl at the counter, barely looking up from her phone. She handed me a tag for my items and waved me in. I took the last stall, all the way at the end. I always liked the end stalls. Felt more private. The door was one of those solid ones, not the kind with gaps at the bottom. It had a little lock, just a simple turn knob. I tried on the first shirt. Didn't like it. Moved on to the next one. I was halfway through pulling it down over my head when I heard something. A sound. Small. Quick. I froze. It came from outside the stall. Just a little noise, like fabric shifting. I figured someone else had come in. No big deal. I kept changing. When I was done, I reached for the lock. Turned it. It didn't move. I tried again, harder this time. It barely budged. My fingers slipped. The lock was stuck. I let out a breath, adjusted my grip, and twisted again. Nothing. It didn't even turn halfway. I frowned, feeling a weird little knot form in my stomach, but I told myself it was just old. Maybe jammed. I knocked on the door. "Hey," I said, "I think the lock's stuck." No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. "Hello? Anyone out there?" Then I heard it. Breathing. right outside the door. It was slow, careful, not like someone out of breath. Just steady, like whoever was there didn't want me to know they were standing there. I felt my whole body go cold. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, my hand still on the lock. The breathing didn't stop. I swallowed hard and tried the lock again. It moved a fraction of an inch. I twisted with all my strength, feeling my fingertips go sore. It wouldn't turn. I could hear the air moving, just on the other side of the door. Deep, steady breaths. In. Out. In. Out. I pressed my lips together, forcing myself not to panic. I glanced down at the bottom of the stall door. No gap. I couldn't see anything. I knocked one more time, harder. Hello? The breathing stopped. Silence. I waited, every second stretching longer than it should. I leaned in a little, straining to hear if they had left, but I couldn't tell. Then, suddenly, the handle moved. Not a little. Not like someone brushing past. It twisted, hard, shaking against the lock. Someone was trying to open it. I yanked back, pressing myself against the wall. My heart pounded so hard I thought I would be sick. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. The handle rattled again. Shaking, jerking. I forced myself to move. I grabbed my bag off the hook and slammed my fist against the door. Hey! My voice was loud this time, sharp. I'm in here. Silence again. I held my breath, listening. Nothing. No breathing. No footsteps. Then, the sound of someone walking away. Slow, unhurried. I didn't move. I stood there, my skin cold, waiting. I counted to 10. Then 20. I turned back to the lock. My fingers were shaking, but I gripped it hard and tried again. It turned just a little more. Another twist, and suddenly it clicked. The door swung open. I stepped out fast, looking left, then right. No one was there. The fitting room was empty. The hallway was silent. The only sound was the faint music from the store's speakers. I rushed out, my bag clutched tight in my hand. The girl at the counter was still on her phone, not even looking up. I hesitated for half a second, then walked right past her, out into the store. I didn't stop. I didn't even put the clothes back. I kept going, straight out of the store, into the main mall. People walked past me, talking, laughing, shopping like nothing was wrong. I turned back, looking through the glass storefront. A man stood near the fitting rooms. Not going in. Just standing there, facing the hallway. He wasn't looking at clothes. He wasn't holding anything. I don't know if he saw me leave. I don't know if he had been waiting. But I left the mall without buying anything. I got into my car, locked the doors, and sat there until my breathing felt normal again. I don't go to that store anymore. It was around 6:30 in the evening when I heard the knock. 3 solid knocks, evenly spaced. I was in the kitchen, finishing up a late dinner. The sound made me stop mid-bite. I live alone. Been in the same apartment for 3 years, a small place on the 3rd floor. It's nothing fancy, but it's quiet. I don't get visitors. Anyone who comes by is either a delivery guy or someone who has the wrong door. I set my fork down and walked over. The peephole was scratched, made everything blurry, but I could see a man standing there. He wore a dark blue work uniform with a name tag clipped to the chest pocket. His sleeves were rolled up, and he held a clipboard in one hand. He looked normal, maybe late 40s. Short hair, clean shaven. He knocked again, a little louder this time. I cleared my throat. "Yeah. Evening, sir," he said. His voice was steady, polite. "I'm here for the scheduled inspection. Should only take a few minutes." I frowned. I hadn't scheduled anything. "What inspection?" I asked. "Routine check. Just making sure everything's up to code." I hesitated. My landlord never mentioned anything about inspections. I would have gotten an email, maybe a notice under my door. But there was nothing. "Who sent you?" I asked. "The building manager," he said, like it was obvious. "This won't take long." I didn't like it. Something about the way he spoke, how he wasn't giving any real details. If this was real, wouldn't I have been told ahead of time? I kept my hand on the lock. "I wasn't told about this." He sighed like I was being difficult. "Not everyone gets the notice, but this is standard. Just need to check the pipes, smoke detectors, that sort of thing." He tapped the clipboard against his hand. The movement felt off. It was slow, deliberate. My stomach tightened. "Sorry," I said, "but I can't let you in without proof." Silence. He didn't move. Just stood there. Then he gave a small nod, like he was thinking something over. "You can call the manager if you want," he said. "They'll confirm it." His voice was different now. He wasn't being polite anymore. I didn't answer. I just stood there, watching him through the peephole. He waited. Then he shifted his weight and ran a hand over his jaw. "Look, I've got a schedule to keep. If we don't do this today, we'll have to reschedule, and that's a whole thing. Just let me in real quick." The way he said that "just let me in real quick" made my skin crawl. It was too casual, too forced. I stepped back from the door, my breath coming faster. I thought about calling my landlord, but I didn't want him to hear me making the call. Then the doorknob moved. I jumped. He was trying to turn it, testing if it was locked. It was. Thank God it was. I backed away, heart pounding. Then he knocked again. This time it was softer. 3 slow taps. I didn't say anything. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. "Come on, man." It was almost familiar. Like he knew me. I grabbed my phone and pulled up my landlord's number. The ringing felt like it went on forever. "Pick up. Pick up." Behind the door, nothing. No more knocking. No footsteps. Just silence. Then my landlord answered. "Hello? There's a guy here," I said quickly. "Says he's here for an inspection. Did you send someone?" A pause. Then, "No," he said. "We don't do surprise inspections." My fingers went numb. "Are you home?" my landlord asked. "Yeah," I whispered. "Lock your door. Don't open it. I'm calling security." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. I stood there, gripping my phone, waiting to hear something outside. Nothing. I waited another minute. Then, slowly, I moved back to the peephole. The hallway was empty. I didn't hear him leave. No footsteps. No door closing. Just gone. I stayed there, barely breathing. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then a noise. Not at the door. At my window. I live on the 3rd floor. There's no balcony, no fire escape. Just a straight drop to the ground. But I heard it. A soft, slow tapping against the glass. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just stepped back, gripping my phone so tight my knuckles ached. Then, silence again. I don't remember how long I stood there. Eventually, security showed up. They checked the hallway, the stairwell, even outside near the windows. Nothing. No sign of anyone. No cameras in the building. No way to know where he went. I didn't sleep that night. I still don't know what he wanted. But I know one thing. He wasn't a worker. I was on my way home from work, later than usual. It had been a long day, and I just wanted to get home, eat something, and sleep. Traffic wasn't bad, but I caught a red light at an intersection a few blocks from my apartment. I remember sighing, just staring at the red glow, zoning out. Then I noticed the car next to me. It was a dark sedan, maybe a few years old, nothing unusual. The windows weren't tinted too dark, so I could see inside. At first, I wasn't really paying attention. Just another car, another driver waiting for the light. But then I saw movement in the back seat. A kid, maybe 10 years old. Short hair, pale face. At first, I thought they were just fidgeting, but then they turned and looked right at me. Their lips moved. 2 words. Help me. I felt something in my stomach drop. I blinked, not sure if I saw it right. The kid's mouth moved again. Help me. I straightened up, my hands gripping the wheel. Then the driver turned and looked at me. A man. Mid-40s, maybe older. Short hair, dark jacket. His face was blank. No reaction. He just stared, eyes locked onto mine. I felt my heart pick up. My first instinct was to grab my phone, but before I could, the light turned green. And the car took off. Not normal driving. Not pulling away casually. He sped through the intersection, cutting across lanes, disappearing down the road. I hesitated for half a second, then pressed the gas, trying to keep up. My mind was racing. Did I really just see that? Was the kid joking? Messing around? No, that wasn't a joke. The way they looked at me wide-eyed, desperate. The way they mouthed the words twice. Something was wrong. I sped up, keeping the sedan in sight. It weaved through traffic, faster than normal. Not crazy fast, not enough to draw attention, but enough to make it clear they didn't want to be followed. I was going to call 911. My hand hovered over my phone, but I didn't want to lose them. I kept one hand on the wheel, fumbling to open the dial pad. Then the sedan took a hard right onto a side street. I swerved, following. The road was darker here. Less streetlights, fewer cars. The sedan was ahead, moving fast. I dialed. My hands were slick on the wheel. The ringing felt like it went on forever. 911, what's your emergency? I kept my eyes on the sedan. There's a car, I said. My voice felt shaky. A black sedan. A kid in the back seat just mouthed, "Help me." The driver saw me watching and sped off. "Where are you located?" I gave the street name. The sedan was getting further. I pressed the gas. "I'm following them, but..." "Do not follow," the operator said, cutting me off. "Can you provide a license plate number?" I squinted, but the car was too far now. The taillights glowed red, blurry in the dark. I can't see it. But it was a black sedan, older model. The driver was a white male, maybe mid-40s. "Do you have a description of the child?" "Short hair, light skin. Looked around 10. They..." The sedan turned again. A sharp left, fast. I slowed at the intersection, heart pounding. The road it turned onto was narrow, lined with warehouses and closed shops. No lights. No other cars. I stopped. The operator was still talking. "Ma'am? Are you still there?" I swallowed hard. They just turned onto a side street. "I don't think I should." "Do not follow," she repeated. "We're dispatching officers to the area. Can you safely wait somewhere nearby?" I looked down the dark street. The sedan was gone. No movement. No taillights. Just empty road disappearing into shadows. If I turned down there, I'd be alone. I gripped the wheel, forcing myself to breathe. "Yeah," I said. "I'll wait." The next few minutes felt stretched. I kept looking in my rear view, half expecting the sedan to come back, to pull up behind me, the driver stepping out. I shook the thought away. A few minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. I waved them down and told them everything. They asked the same questions. The plate number, the child's description, the exact direction they went. I answered as best as I could. One of the officers nodded, writing it down. The other one looked down the road where the sedan had vanished. "We'll check it out," he said. "You did the right thing not following." I nodded, gripping the straps of my bag to keep my hands from shaking. They told me they'd contact me if they needed anything else, then got back in their car and drove down the street, disappearing into the dark. I sat there for a long time before finally driving home. I kept checking the news for the next few days, searching for reports. A missing child. A police chase. Anything. I never found anything. I don't know what happened. I don't know if the police found them. I don't know if I was the only one who saw. But I know what I saw. And I can't stop thinking about it. I was drunk, but not that drunk. I remember that clearly. The bar was crowded, my friends were loud, and I had that heavy feeling in my limbs that told me I was at my limit. I knew it was time to go. I called a rideshare like I always did, double-checked the app, saw the make and model of the car, even the driver's name. Black sedan. Driver named Mike. I stepped outside into the cold air, rubbing my arms. The street was busy with people heading home, cars pulling up and leaving just as fast. I stood on the curb, waiting. Then I saw it. A black sedan, same make and model as the app showed, rolling up slow. It stopped right in front of me. The windows were tinted, but I could see the driver's shape in the front seat. I pulled open the back door and got in. The inside smelled like air freshener, but under that, something else. Stale. Sweaty. The kind of smell that lingers in a car that's been driven too long without the windows down. I shut the door, settled in, and checked the app again. The little map was updating, showing we were moving. Right direction. I glanced at the driver in the rearview mirror. "Mike?" I asked. No answer. That was weird. Usually, they at least say yeah or something. But he just kept his hands on the wheel, eyes on the road. I cleared my throat. How's your night been?" "Nothing." I sat back, frowning. Maybe he didn't hear me? Maybe he just wasn't the chatty type? The car kept moving, smooth and steady. I looked outside. The streetlights blurred past. We were heading in the right direction, but something about the way he drove felt off. Like he was going just a little too fast, just a little too controlled. I checked the app again. The estimated time said 5 minutes. I exhaled, tried to shake the weird feeling. Maybe I was overthinking it. I looked at the back of his head, the way his hands gripped the wheel too tight. A minute passed. Then another. I glanced out the window again. We should have turned left a block ago. My stomach tightened. I leaned forward. "Hey, I think you..." The car sped up. Not a lot. Just enough that I felt it. I stared at the back of his head, my throat dry. "Hey," I said, louder this time. "You missed the turn." No response. I glanced at my phone again. The little car on the app was moving further from the route. I swallowed hard. "Dude, you missed my turn. You need to." The car sped up again. My pulse slammed in my ears. I sat back, suddenly feeling too aware of how small the back seat was. How the doors had no handles on the inside. "Hey, stop the car," I said, my voice shaking now. Nothing. I reached forward, tapping his shoulder. "Hey!" His hand shot up and grabbed my wrist. Tight. Too tight. His fingers dug into my skin. I sucked in a sharp breath, heart pounding. I tried to pull back, but he held firm. Kept his eyes on the road, his grip like a vice. Then, slowly, he turned his head just enough for me to see his face in the rearview mirror. And he smiled. I yanked my arm back as hard as I could. His grip held for a second, then slipped. I scrambled against the door, pressing back, my chest heaving. "Let me out," I said, breathless. "Let me out right now." He didn't answer. The car kept moving. I looked at my phone again. Hands shaking. The little car was nowhere near my home anymore. I fumbled for the emergency call button on the app, but before I could press it, he slammed on the brakes. I flew forward, hitting the back of the seat. My hand shot out, gripping the headrest to steady myself. Then the locks clicked open. I didn't wait. I grabbed the handle and threw myself out of the car. I hit the pavement hard, my hands scraping against the rough concrete. I gasped, my knees buckling as I scrambled to stand up. The car idled for a second. Then the tires screeched, and it sped off into the night. I stood there, panting, my whole body shaking. I looked around, realizing I had no idea where I was. The street was empty. No people. Just dark storefronts and flickering streetlights. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, pressing 911. I told them everything. The car. The driver. The route. They asked if I got the plate number. I hadn't. In my panic, I never looked. By the time the cops got there, The car was long gone. They asked if I was hurt. I wasn't, just scraped up. They offered to take me home, and I didn't argue. I checked the app later. No ride was ever recorded. The request was still searching for a driver. Whoever picked me up wasn't my ride. I don't know if he was waiting. If he just saw a drunk guy standing alone and took a chance. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gotten out. But I still see that smile in the mirror. And I still feel his fingers around my wrist. I worked late that night. Later than usual. The office was almost empty when I left, just a couple of lights still on in the other department. I packed up my things, locked my computer, and grabbed my coat. Outside, the hallway was quiet. The cleaning crew had already come through. I walked down to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. The air felt still, that weird silence you get when a building is mostly empty. The doors opened, and I stepped inside. The ride down was slow. The numbers above the door lit up one by one. When I reached the parking garage, the doors slid open with a soft chime. It was cold down there. Colder than it should have been. The kind of cold that settles in your bones. The air smelled like oil and concrete. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the space, flickering in some places. I was parked near the far end, where the overhead lights weren't as bright. I started walking, my footsteps echoing. There weren't many cars left, just a handful scattered around. I reached into my bag, feeling for my keys. I always held them tight when I walked alone. I got to my car, pressed a button, and heard the click of the locks. I grabbed a handle. Then someone behind me said, "You left something." I froze. The voice was close. Too close. I turned fast, my heart pounding. No one was there. I looked around, my breath coming short. The garage stretched out, empty. No movement. Just cars and cold air. I swallowed hard, gripping my keys. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was the wind carrying a sound from somewhere else. I turned back to my car, but my hands were shaking now. I pulled open the door and threw my bag inside. Then I heard it again. "You left something." Clearer this time. A man's voice. Low. Steady. I spun around, my back against the car. My eyes darted across the garage, scanning the rows of vehicles, the concrete pillars. Still no one. But something felt wrong. Like I was being watched. I reached for my phone, fumbling with the screen, my fingers numb. I turned on the flashlight and swept it across the space. The beam cut through the dim light, bouncing off metal and concrete. Then movement. A shadow, shifting just behind a pillar a few rows over. I sucked in a breath, my chest tight. Someone was there. They were standing just out of sight, watching. Waiting. My pulse pounded in my ears. I stepped back, my foot hitting the edge of the door. I didn't know what to do. My car was right there. I could get in. Lock the doors. Drive away. But what if he was faster? I gripped my keys between my fingers like a weapon and forced myself to speak. "Who's there?" No answer. Just silence. Then a shoe scuffed against the concrete. The sound came from the other side of the car. He had moved. I yanked open the door and threw myself inside. I slammed it shut and hit the lock button so hard my finger hurt. My breathing was loud in the enclosed space, my hands gripping the wheel even though I hadn't started the engine yet. I couldn't see him, but he was there. I knew he was. I forced myself to move. I jammed the key into the ignition, twisting hard. The engine rumbled to life. Then a hand slapped against my window. I screamed. I barely got a glimpse of him, a dark jacket, a pale face, but I didn't wait. I shoved the car into reverse so fast the tires screeched. The hand slid away as I peeled back out of the space, my tires screeching against the concrete. I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. I just sped toward the exit, my chest tight, my breath coming in gasps. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. I hit the ramp and shot up into the night, my heart still hammering. I didn't stop driving. Not until I was miles away. I pulled over on a well-lit street and just sat there, hands gripping the wheel, my whole body shaking. I checked my phone. My hands were too unsteady to type at first, but I finally managed to call someone. I never saw his face clearly. Never found out who he was. But I know one thing. He wasn't there to give me something I left behind. I woke up because I was cold. I remember that part clearly. The kind of cold that makes your skin feel tight. My blanket had slid halfway off the bed, but that wasn't what made me sit up. It was the air. It felt different, sharper. My apartment has terrible insulation, but my bedroom stays warm when the door is shut. That night, though, the air felt like it was coming from outside. I turned over to grab my blanket, and that's when I saw it. My window was open. Not just cracked. Wide open. I froze. I always kept it shut. I never even opened it during the summer because my building didn't have screens, and I didn't want bugs getting in. It was locked when I went to sleep. My heart started beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. I sat there, staring at the dark shape of the window against the night sky. My apartment was on the second floor. There was no fire escape, no ledge, nothing to climb. I tried to tell myself I had forgotten to lock it, that maybe the wind had pushed it open. But there was no wind. The trees outside weren't moving. The air was still. I reached over and turned on my bedside lamp. And that's when I noticed the floor. There was dirt. Just a little, near the window frame. A few smudges, like someone had stepped inside and then wiped their shoes before going further. I didn't move. I just sat there, trying to listen, trying to hear something over the sound of my own breathing. My bedroom door was open. I never slept with it open. I felt sick. If someone had come in, they could be anywhere in the apartment. The air felt too thick. My hands were sweaty, but I was still so cold. I reached for my phone, trying to be quiet. My fingers fumbled with the screen. I kept telling myself to call the police, but I couldn't make myself press the button. What if they were still here? What if they heard me? I turned off the lamp. My own heartbeat was too loud. I stayed like that for I don't know how long. Minutes, maybe longer. Then, somewhere in the apartment, the floor creaked. I stopped breathing. It was soft, but it was real. Not the pipes. Not the building settling. Someone was in my apartment. I couldn't stay in that bed. I had to move. I slid out as slowly as I could, keeping my feet off the floor. My window was still open. I thought about climbing out, but the drop was too high. I had to go through the apartment. I moved toward the door, trying to listen for anything else. My whole body felt slow, like my limbs weren't connected right. The hallway was dark. I stepped out and kept close to the wall. I didn't have any weapons, nothing heavy, nothing sharp. I listened. Nothing. The living room was just past the kitchen. The front door was beyond that. The floor felt like it would creak under me any second. I took one step, then another. Then I saw it. The front door was unlocked. I knew I had locked it before bed. I moved faster. I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I reached for the lock, turned it as fast as I could, pulled the door open. The hallway outside was empty. I stepped out and shut the door behind me. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely turn the lock. I didn't go back inside. I went straight downstairs, straight out onto the street. I didn't stop walking until I was 2 blocks away. I called a friend, told him something was wrong. He picked me up, and I stayed at his place that night. The next day, we went back. Nothing was missing. Not my wallet, not my laptop, nothing. But there was more dirt near the window. And the floor near the kitchen looked different, like someone had been standing there for a long time. I never found out who it was. I moved out 2 weeks later. The baby monitor was quiet except for the soft sound of the fan in the nursery. I was sitting on the couch in the living room, scrolling through my phone, half watching some reality show on low volume. It was almost 11. The parents were supposed to be home by midnight. The house was big but old. The kind where every step on the hardwood creaked, even when you tried to be careful. The nursery was upstairs at the end of the hall, across from the parents' bedroom. I had checked on the baby twice already. She was sleeping fine. Then I heard it. A creaking sound from upstairs. I looked at the baby monitor. Nothing. The little green light blinked steady. I turned the TV volume down all the way. Listened. Another creak. Slow, deliberate. Not the baby. The old house made noises, sure. I had heard it settle a few times earlier, pipes shifting, wind against the windows. This was different. I sat there, waiting to hear it again. Nothing. Maybe the parents had come home early, though I hadn't heard a car. I stood up. The living room light cast a glow up the staircase, but everything past the top step was dark. I took my phone with me, holding it tight. The stairs creaked under my weight, but I kept my steps light. I didn't want to wake the baby if it was nothing. At the top, the hallway was still. The nursery door was cracked open like I had left it. I took a few more steps. Another creak. I stopped. It had come from the parents' bedroom. The door was open, but only a little. Just a few inches. I was sure it had been closed before. I swallowed, listening hard. My fingers felt tight around my phone. I took a step closer, reached out, and nudged the door open. The room was dark, but enough light came in from the hallway to see. The closet door was open. Not all the way. Just slightly. I had been in here earlier to grab a spare blanket for the baby. The closet had been shut. My breathing felt loud. I took another step forward. The floor groaned under me. Then I saw it. At the bottom of the closet, just barely visible past the crack in the door, was a pair of shoes. Black. Worn. Not facing in. Facing out. Like someone was standing there. Watching. I didn't move. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I wasn't imagining it. Someone was in there. I took a slow step back, trying not to make a sound. I needed to get the baby. I turned, moving fast but quiet. My hands felt cold. The nursery door was still open. I slipped inside, went straight to the crib. She was still asleep, her little chest rising and falling under the nightlight's glow. I reached down, careful not to wake her, and lifted her up. She stirred but didn't cry. Then, from down the hall, a soft sound. A breath. I didn't stop. I held her close and moved to the bedroom door. Peered out. The hallway was still empty. The closet door was open wider now. I moved fast. Out of the room, down the stairs. My legs felt shaky, but I didn't stop. I grabbed the keys from the counter, unlocked the front door, and stepped outside into the cold night air. I got in the car, locked the doors, and kept the baby against my chest. I called the police. They came fast. Checked the house. They found the closet door open, just like I had seen it. But no one was inside. No windows were open. No doors were unlocked. But in the bedroom closet, on the floor where the shoes had been, a footprint. The parents came home while the police were still there. They were shaken but grateful. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was out of place. Except for the closet door. I never babysat for them again. I was in bed when my phone buzzed. It was almost 2 a.m. I wasn't asleep yet, just lying there in the dark, scrolling. I had work in the morning but couldn't shut my brain off. The notification was from my doorbell camera app. Motion detected at front door. I hesitated before tapping it. Probably a cat or a moth flying too close to the lens. Maybe some kid messing around. It had happened before. The feed loaded. A man was standing inches from the camera. Not moving. Not knocking. Just staring. His face filled the screen. His eyes looked directly into the lens. He wasn't wearing a mask, no hood, nothing to hide his face. He was just there. Close enough that I could see the shine on his skin from the porch light. I sat up in bed. He didn't move. Didn't blink. The timestamp showed he had been standing there for almost a full minute before the motion alert triggered. I turned up the volume. No sound. No footsteps. Just him standing too close, breathing. I reached for the bedside lamp but stopped myself. I didn't want him to know I was awake. I checked the locks on my phone. Deadbolt was on. Chain was on. Back door was locked. The windows were shut. The camera had a microphone. I could have said something. Asked what he wanted. I didn't. I just watched him. His expression never changed. He wasn't smiling. Wasn't angry. Just blank. Then he leaned in closer. His nose almost touched the camera. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, like that would do anything. My heart was pounding. Then, finally, he moved. Not away. He reached up, slowly, and ran his fingers over the camera. Lightly, like he was testing it. Then he stepped back. Just enough for me to see more of him. Dark jacket. Dirty jeans. His hands hung at his sides. Then he did something that made my stomach drop. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. Keys. Not his. Mine. My spare house key. The one I kept in the little magnetic box under the porch railing. I had put it there months ago in case I locked myself out. I had never used it. I had never even told anyone it was there. He held it up, tilting his head like he wanted to make sure I saw it. Then he turned. Not toward the street. Toward the side of the house, where the back door was. I jumped out of bed so fast I nearly tripped. I ran to the bedroom door, locked it, then grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The dispatcher answered. I whispered that someone was outside, that he had my key, that he was trying to get in. She told me to stay on the line. Asked if I had a weapon. I didn't. I grabbed the heaviest thing near me, a lamp, and stood by the door, listening. The camera app was still open. I switched to the backyard feed. He was there, standing at the back door, testing the handle. My stomach turned to ice. He had the key. He could get in. I gripped the lamp tighter, heart slamming against my ribs. Then, a siren. Not far. Getting closer. The man froze. For the first time, his expression changed. Not fear. Not panic. Just disappointment. Then he turned and walked away. Not running. Just walking. The police showed up fast. 2 cars. They searched the yard, the street. He was gone. They found the key on the back steps. He had dropped it. The officer asked if I had seen his face clearly. I had. They said they would patrol the area. Said to call if I saw anything else. They left. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I took the key box from under the porch and threw it in the trash. I moved a chair in front of the bedroom door before trying to rest. And even after that, I kept waking up, thinking I heard something. Because the worst part wasn't that he had found my key. The worst part was that he knew I was watching him. And he didn't care. I remember that morning like it was yesterday. It started out like any other. I had woken up early, well before sunrise, and decided to go for a jog. The weather was cool, a little crisp, which was perfect for the trail I like to run. I had been running this same wooded path for years, but that day felt different from the start. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, even though nothing was out of place at first. The trail was tucked deep into the woods, far from any major roads. There were no houses around, just trees and dirt paths. It was peaceful, quiet, the kind of place I would go to clear my head. I had the place to myself, or so I thought. I started off at a slow pace, enjoying the silence, the sound of my shoes crunching on the gravel. But after about 10 minutes in, I started to notice something odd. I thought I heard footsteps behind me. It wasn't much at first, just a faint shuffle, barely noticeable over the sound of my own breath. I glanced over my shoulder. There was nobody there. The path was empty. I shook it off, assuming it was just the wind or an animal in the woods. I've heard wildlife before, especially early in the morning. But then it happened again. This time, I definitely heard the sound of footsteps, slower, almost in sync with mine. I turned around once more carefully this time. Still nothing. No one. I wasn't paranoid, not really. But something about it felt off. The air felt heavier, the woods too still. I thought maybe someone else had decided to use the same trail that day, but I couldn't see anyone. I started to pick up my pace, not because I was scared, but because I wanted to get ahead of whoever might be behind me. But then, I heard it again. The same footsteps. Closer this time. I sped up, trying to ignore the feeling creeping over me. I didn't want to be followed. I was alone out there, with no one around for miles. But the faster I ran, the faster the footsteps behind me seemed to follow. It was like the person, whoever it was matching my pace. At that point, I started running full speed. My heart was beating harder, and I was starting to panic. I wanted to turn around, but I was afraid if I did, I would see someone right behind me. So I just kept going, not daring to look back. I rounded a bend in the trail and then stopped. I don't know why I stopped. Maybe I thought that if I just paused for a second, the person following me would keep going. Or maybe I just needed to catch my breath. But when I stopped, everything went silent. The footsteps stopped too. I stood there, breathing heavily, my heart pounding in my chest. I glanced over my shoulder again. There was no one there. I thought I was imagining things, that maybe I had let my mind play tricks on me. But then, as I looked down at the dirt trail, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Fresh footprints. They weren't mine. They were too close together, too light to be from a heavy runner like me. And they were in the exact spot where I had stopped running, only a few feet behind me. My stomach dropped. I took a step back, trying to process what I was seeing. There were no other tracks in front of me, no sign of anyone having passed through before. But these prints, they were clear. Fresh. They had to have been made only seconds before. I quickly turned around again and looked down the trail in both directions. Nothing. No one. It was as if the person had vanished into thin air. I backed away slowly, then turned and started running again, faster this time. I didn't care what direction I was headed anymore. I just needed to get out of there, away from whatever or whoever had been following me. I didn't stop to look back again. I just kept running, my breath ragged, my legs burning. When I finally reached the end of the trail, where the parking lot was, I stopped and looked around. There was no one in sight. I was alone, but I didn't feel safe anymore. I got into my car, locked the doors, and just sat there for a few minutes, trying to calm myself down. I thought about going back, maybe checking the trail where I had seen the footprints, but the idea made my skin crawl. I ended up driving straight home. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there with me, someone watching, someone following. The whole time I was running, I kept thinking I was being paranoid. But now, after seeing those footprints, I couldn't ignore what had happened. I haven't gone back to that trail since. I don't know if it was just a coincidence, or if someone was actually out there, following me. Either way, I don't want to find out. It happened a few months ago, but I still think about it almost every time I drive at night. I can't seem to shake the feeling, even now. I had just finished a long shift at work and was on my way home when I realized I was running low on gas. I wasn't too far from a gas station that I usually stopped at, so I decided to pull in. It was already late, around midnight, and the place was practically empty, just like I expected. I remember it being unusually quiet for a gas station. The faint buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead was the only sound, aside from the quiet hum of the pumps. I was the only car there. I filled up the tank quickly, then made my way inside to pay. The cashier was standing behind the counter, looking a little tired, but that wasn't unusual at that hour. He gave me a quick nod when I walked in. I didn't think much of it. I was just tired and looking forward to getting home. I approached the counter and handed him my card. As he was processing the payment, he casually asked, "Are you alone?" I remember thinking it was a weird question. Not in a bad way, but just odd, you know? It wasn't like he was asking out of concern or anything. It was like he was just making small talk. So, without thinking too much about it, I said, "Yeah, I'm alone." The moment the words left my mouth, his face changed. It was subtle at first, but it was definitely there. His expression, which had been neutral before, turned into something more serious. It was almost like a flicker of concern, or maybe something else, something I couldn't quite place. I remember the way his eyes seemed to narrow, and he glanced quickly over his shoulder, like he was checking something behind him. Then, he looked back at me and said, in a quieter voice, "Then don't go back outside yet." I froze. I couldn't help it. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, staring at him, trying to figure out if I had heard him right. He didn't smile, didn't make any jokes, and didn't seem like he was playing around. It was all too serious. "Excuse me?" I finally managed to ask. I don't know why, but I had this sudden wave of unease. It was like the air in the room had changed, like everything had gotten heavier. He looked at me again, and for a second, I thought maybe he was going to tell me something, but he didn't. Instead, he just gave a small shake of his head, like he was trying to decide whether or not he should say anything more. I stood there for a long moment, just staring at him. He didn't move, and I could feel my heart start to race. I couldn't tell if he was warning me or if something else was going on. The silence between us was thick. Finally, I just grabbed my receipt, shoved it into my bag, and took a step back from the counter. I remember my hand trembling a little as I took my card back. I didn't say anything else. I just nodded at him, not sure if I should say anything or if I should leave. The whole situation felt off, like I was missing something obvious. I didn't want to ask him what he meant, though. I didn't want to make the situation worse. I turned toward the door, still unsure of what was going on, but when I looked back at him, he was still watching me. His eyes were fixed on me now, like he was waiting for me to leave, but also like he was expecting something. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the feeling was unmistakable. I stepped outside, still trying to shake off the unease in my stomach. The air outside felt colder than it should have been for that time of year, and the lights in the parking lot flickered slightly. My car was parked right by the door, so I didn't have to walk far. I took a quick glance around, half expecting to see something or someone, but there was nothing unusual. No one else was around. Just the quiet hum of the gas station and the faint sounds of traffic from the nearby road. I was about to get into my car when I noticed something. There was a man standing near the far side of the lot, just past the row of trees. He was standing still, facing my car, but his body was slightly angled, like he was trying to stay hidden in the shadows. I couldn't see his face, but I could tell he was looking directly at me. I don't know how long he had been standing there, but the moment I saw him, I felt my whole body go cold. That same feeling of dread from inside the store washed over me again. The man didn't move, didn't make a sound. He just stood there, staring. I didn't waste another second. I threw open my car door, jumped inside, and locked the door without looking away from the man. My hands were shaking as I started the engine, and I swear I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. I glanced at the gas station one last time before I pulled out of the lot. The cashier was standing by the window, still watching me. I couldn't be sure, but I swear there was a hint of something in his expression. A look that said he knew exactly what was going on outside, even if I didn't. I drove home faster than I usually would, and I didn't stop again until I got there. I don't know why I felt so compelled to leave so quickly, but I did. Every time I think about it, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I had stayed just a little longer, or if I had asked the cashier what he meant by his warning. I haven't gone back to that gas station since. I don't know if the man I saw outside was connected to what the cashier said, but I don't want to find out. I still think about it now and then, but the one thing I'm sure of is that I'm never stopping at that place late at night again. We had just moved into our first house, a small, old thing on the edge of town. It was the perfect fixer-upper, or at least, that's what we thought. We spent months saving up for it, finding the right one, and we were finally here. The house had character, creaky floors, old wooden beams, a small attic that I had always been curious about, but it was the kind of house you could see potential in. The first few days were mostly unpacking and figuring out where to put everything. It was a bit of a mess, but it felt good. We both were excited. Things were going well until about a week in, when the sound started. At first, I thought I was imagining things. It was late at night, around 2 a.m., and we were both in bed. I was just about to drift off when I heard it. It was soft, like something brushing against the floor above us. A shuffle. Just the faintest sound, but it was enough to pull me out of my half-sleep. I laid there for a second, listening, trying to figure out what it could be. At first, I thought maybe it was just the owls settling, the kind of noises older homes make when the temperature drops. But then I heard it again. This time, it was a little louder. Like someone was moving around up there. I didn't want to wake my husband over something that seemed so small, so I just brushed it off. It was probably a raccoon or a squirrel, something small. We lived near some trees, and I figured the animals had probably found a way into the attic. The next night, though, the sound came again. And this time, it was a bit more distinct. Shuffling. It sounded like something or someone was walking around up there. I could hear it moving slowly, dragging something. My heart skipped a beat. Now, I wasn't so sure. Why would there be someone moving around in the attic? We hadn't even unpacked everything, let alone checked the attic. I turned over in bed to face my husband. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. He groaned and stretched, half awake. What?" The shuffling noise. "It's coming from the attic." He didn't seem too worried. "It's probably just an animal," he muttered before rolling over and going back to sleep. I stayed up for a while, just listening. The noise came and went, each time just as unsettling. My mind raced. I told myself it was just some critter up there. The house was old. It had to be. But deep down, I had this creeping feeling that something wasn't right. I was starting to get scared, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. So, I tried to ignore it and went back to sleep. The next day, I brought it up again to my husband. He didn't seem to be taking it seriously, but he agreed to check out the attic when we had time. So, that weekend, we made our way up there. The attic was dusty and smelled musty, like no one had been up there in years. There were old boxes scattered around, and bits of old furniture covered with sheets. It wasn't much to look at, honestly, but it was exactly what you'd expect from an unused attic. I climbed up the ladder first, poking my head around, looking for anything out of place. The only thing I saw was the usual old junk. But then, just as I was about to turn around and go back down, I noticed something in the far corner. Something partially covered by a sheet. "Hey," I called to my husband, who was standing at the bottom of the ladder. "Come look at this." He climbed up after me and came over to where I was standing. There, in the corner, was an old mattress. It was crumpled and worn, like it had been up there for a long time. And around it, food wrappers. Lots of them. Old bags of chips, candy wrappers, fast food containers. Everything was just scattered around the mattress. It looked like someone had been living up there. It wasn't just a random collection of trash, it seemed deliberate. I felt my stomach twist. My breath caught in my throat as I stood there staring at the mess. "What the hell is this?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My husband looked at me, his face going pale. "What the hell?" We both stood there for a second, processing what we were seeing. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces started to come together. The noises at night. The shuffling. It wasn't an animal. It had been a person, or someone had been up there. How long had they been living in our attic? I felt a cold wave of panic wash over me. I stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. "This isn't just trash, is it?" I asked. My husband's voice was tense. "No, it's not." We didn't touch anything at first. It felt wrong, like if we disturbed the mess, we would be crossing a line we weren't ready to cross. But after a few moments, we knew we had to do something. We had to call someone. So, we left the attic and went straight to the phone. We called the police. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but it was too much. I was too scared to just handle it myself. The police were understanding, though. They told us to stay in the house, and they sent someone out immediately to check things out. When the officer arrived, we led him up to the attic. He didn't say much at first, just examined the mattress and the mess. After a while, he turned to us, his face serious. "Someone has been living up here for a while," he said. "It's clear from the wrappers and the mattress." He asked if we knew of anyone who might have had access to the house before we moved in. My husband and I both shook our heads. We'd done a walkthrough before buying the house, and everything seemed fine. The officer said that it could have been someone who had been squatting there for a while. But that wasn't the part that freaked me out. What really got to me was when he said, "This might be recent, but it's hard to say how long they've been up here. We'll need to investigate further." They took everything down. They searched the attic, and they found some other strange things, scratches on the floor, things moved around that shouldn't have been. But there was no sign of the person who had been there. No trace. It was like they vanished. We never found out who it was. The police didn't find any evidence of forced entry, and no one had seen anything suspicious. I tried to put it out of my mind, but every time I hear the owls creak at night, I think about those shuffling noises. We never really felt safe in that house again. After a few weeks, we decided to move out. It was just too much. We sold the house and found a new place. I haven't thought about it as much lately, but when I do, I can't shake the feeling that whoever or whatever was up there is still out there, waiting. Ask ChatGPT. I've always been the type of person who doesn't get scared easily. I live alone in a small house, and I've always felt comfortable here. It's a quiet neighborhood, pretty calm for the most part. The house isn't anything fancy, just a small 2-bedroom with a yard, but it's mine. And, up until this night, I always felt safe. It started around 2 a.m. I had been in bed for a few hours already, drifting in and out of sleep. I remember waking up because I heard a sound, a soft knock on my door. It was quiet, but enough to stir me from my sleep. At first, I thought it was just a car backfiring outside or maybe the house settling, but then it came again, a single knock. I looked at the clock. 2:01 a.m. I immediately felt a cold twinge of unease in my stomach. Who could be knocking at this hour? I live in a small town, and there are hardly ever people out this late, let alone strangers at my door. I thought maybe it was a neighbor, but it seemed odd. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I didn't want to be paranoid. I got out of bed and walked to the door, moving slowly as I tried to figure out what was going on. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. I approached the door, not sure if I was relieved or more nervous. I crouched down to look through the peephole, thinking that I'd see someone on the other side, maybe just a late-night visitor or a friend who needed help. But when I peered through, I saw nothing. No one was standing there. I hesitated for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. Maybe they'd stepped back, or maybe they were just out of view. But I stood there, staring through the hole for a good minute, and still nothing. The area was completely empty, the porch light casting shadows on the ground, and the street was quiet, like it usually is at this time of night. I let out a deep breath, trying to brush it off. I was probably just imagining things. I turned around to walk back to my room, but before I could even take 2 steps, it came again. Knock. Knock. It was louder this time. The knock sounded right on the door, like someone was standing on the other side, waiting. My heart skipped a beat. I froze. I didn't know what to do. The first knock had been odd, but I could chalk it up to a mistake or some weird coincidence. But this second one felt different. Like someone was deliberately trying to get my attention. And it was so late. Who would be knocking at my door at 2 a.m.? I took a step back, away from the door. My mind raced. Should I open it? Should I call the police? I wasn't sure what to think. I don't know what I was expecting, but I didn't want to make a mistake either. I tried to calm myself down, rationalize. It was probably just a prank, right? Or maybe someone had knocked and walked away, and I just didn't see them. But the way the knock sounded, so deliberate and close, didn't sit right with me. And the fact that they knocked again, even though I hadn't opened the door. I don't know, it just felt off. I looked back at the peephole. I had to check again. There had to be someone there. I approached the door cautiously, taking slow, careful steps, and crouched down to the peephole once more. Nothing. The porch was empty. I could feel the tension in my chest tightening. I felt like something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I backed away from the door and stood in the hallway for a second, trying to figure out if I should call someone or just ignore it. But then, it happened again. Knock. 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 This time, it was faster. More insistent. And it sounded like it was coming from the exact same spot as before. Not off to the side, not down the hallway. Right at the door. I couldn't bring myself to open it this time. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my legs felt weak. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I wasn't prepared for whatever was on the other side. I was paralyzed for a moment. I stood there, just listening to the silence that followed. The knock was sharp, and it echoed in the otherwise quiet house. I grabbed my phone and texted my best friend. I don't know why I didn't call her directly. Maybe because I didn't want to sound ridiculous, but I needed someone to know what was happening. I quickly typed out a message. Someone's knocking at my door. It's really late. I'm scared. I hit send and waited. I didn't move from the hallway. I stayed frozen, waiting for any sound. I wanted to look through the peephole again, but I was too scared. What if they saw me? What if they knew I was watching? The seconds felt like hours. Every little creak of the house made me jump, and every time I looked at the door, I felt my heart race faster. But the knock didn't come again. I don't know how much time passed, but it felt like forever. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a reply from my friend. Call the police. Don't open the door. Her message made my blood run cold. She was right. I shouldn't open it. Something was off. I had to call the police. I dialed 911, my hands shaking as I waited for the operator to pick up. I could hear the phone ringing in the quiet house, my heart thudding in my ears. When the operator answered, I explained as quickly as I could that someone had been knocking on my door, and I didn't know who they were. I told them I hadn't opened the door and that I felt unsafe. The dispatcher stayed calm and assured me that help was on the way. They told me to stay inside, lock all the doors, and not to open the door under any circumstances. I don't remember much of what they said after that. I was just focused on the silence that had fallen again. I stayed in the hallway, staring at the door. I didn't dare approach it again. I don't know how long I waited. It felt like forever, but finally, I heard sirens in the distance. When the police arrived, they searched the house and checked the perimeter. They didn't find anyone, but they assured me they'd keep an eye on the area for the rest of the night. The knocking didn't happen again. I don't know who it was or why they came, but after that, I didn't sleep much that night. Or the night after. I'm still not sure if it was a prank or something worse. Either way, I learned to always trust my gut. I've had the police check my door and windows a couple of times since then. I still lock everything, even during the day. I don't know what would have happened if I had opened that door. And I don't really want to find out. I was at this summer camp for a week when I was about 15. I'd been there before a couple of years earlier and signed up again mostly because all my friends were going, and it was easier than trying to find a summer job. Nothing fancy, just a regular camp deep in the woods with cabins, a mess hall, campfire circle, the usual stuff. You know how it goes. When I got there, they handed me my cabin assignment, Cabin 7. At first, I figured that was no big deal. I'd stayed in a few different cabins before, and as long as it had a roof and a bed, it was fine. But then I saw one of the returning campers, Mia. She was maybe a year older than me and had been at camp for years, and she looked off. Like really tense. I overheard her talking to one of the counselors, saying she couldn't stay in Cabin 7 this time. She didn't say why, just kept shaking her head and looking around like she was trying to keep herself calm. That stuck with me. Why would someone be so freaked out about a cabin? It's not like a haunted house or anything. I thought maybe she had a bad memory from the place or something, but no one pressed her. The counselors just said they figured something else out for her and walked away, like they didn't want to talk about it. The next day, during free time, I caught Mia sitting on the edge of the field, staring into the trees, looking completely frozen. I asked her if she was okay, and she just shook her head and said, "You wouldn't want to be in that cabin either." Then she got up and walked away before I could say anything else. I figured maybe she was messing with me, or it was some inside joke I didn't get. But later that night, when I was getting ready for bed in Cabin 7, I felt something weird. like the whole cabin was watching me. It sounds dumb, but it was just this feeling that the walls were closing in or something. The windows were small, and the trees outside looked like they were leaning in. The wind was barely blowing, but I could hear creaks and rustles all night. The next morning, I noticed that one of the other campers, Kevin, had a weird scratch on his arm. He said he didn't remember how he got it, just woke up with it. No one else seemed to notice or care. I asked around, but no one knew anything. It was just shrugged off as a bug bite or something. The camp counselor on duty that day was a woman named Sarah. She was nice but kind of quiet, always moving between cabins, checking on everyone. I saw her talking to Mia in hushed tones outside the mess hall, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. That afternoon, Mia disappeared. Like, no one knew where she went. They searched the cabins, the woods nearby, even the lake, but no sign. The counselors tried to keep everyone calm, saying she probably just wandered off and would be found soon. But something didn't feel right. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind picked up again, and the cabin felt colder than before. I swear, I heard footsteps outside, slow and deliberate, but when I looked, there was no one there. The flashlight beams from the counselor's rounds didn't catch anything unusual either. The next morning, Mia showed up at breakfast. But she wasn't herself. She didn't talk or look at anyone. She just sat there, eyes wide and blank, like she'd seen something she couldn't unsee. After a while, she begged to leave, said she couldn't stay in cabin 7 or anywhere near it. The counselors arranged for her to go home early. After Mia left, things didn't get better. Strange sounds in the woods, twigs snapping, but no one there. A few kids reported hearing voices calling their names, but no one found anyone around. The counselor Sarah started walking the paths alone at night, which seemed weird to me. She never talked about it. One night, a couple of us snuck out of the cabin after lights out, just to explore. We thought we were being brave, but we ended up hearing heavy breathing behind us in the dark. We ran back to the cabins, but the breathing kept pace for a while before fading away. The last night of camp, I decided I had to figure out what was going on with cabin 7. I stayed up, listening, waiting. Around 2 a.m., I heard soft tapping at the window, like someone trying to be quiet but not quite succeeding. I didn't move at first, just froze, heart pounding. Then I saw a shadow slip past the trees outside, too tall to be a kid. I called out, but there was no answer. The tapping stopped. The shadow disappeared. The next morning, the counselors announced early dismissal because of some safety concerns. I didn't ask questions. I just packed up and left as fast as I could. Years later, I found out Mia never talked about that camp again, and the counselors there wouldn't answer questions either. No one explained what was up with cabin 7 or what had happened during those nights. I never went back, and I don't think I ever will. I don't know why I didn't think to call the police right away. I guess I was trying to convince myself it was just some weird misunderstanding. Maybe someone had ordered it by mistake, or maybe a friend was playing a prank on me. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right the moment I saw the package. It was a Saturday morning, just after 10 a.m. I had just finished my coffee and was scrolling through my phone when I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I don't have a lot of visitors, so I wasn't sure who it could be. I went to the door, opened it, and saw a small, unmarked package sitting on the welcome mat. I didn't recognize the handwriting on the package. It wasn't anything special, just a plain brown box. No return address, no labels, nothing. I bent down, picked it up, and turned it over in my hands. It wasn't heavy, just light enough to make me curious but not enough to be alarming. I had no idea what it was. I figured it was probably something from an online order I'd forgotten about, or maybe some kind of mistake. But as soon as I opened it, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The first thing I noticed was a small velvet pouch inside. I didn't remember ordering anything that would come in a pouch, and I didn't recognize it at all. I pulled it out, and when I opened it, I found a necklace. A silver chain with a small, intricate pendant. It was beautiful, but also unsettling in a way I couldn't explain. It looked expensive, not something I'd just buy on a whim. I had no idea where it had come from. But then I saw the note tucked inside the pouch. The note was simple. It read, "I saw you looking at this in the store. It suits you." My heart skipped. I stared at the words for a few seconds, not really processing what they meant. It was written in plain black ink, no flair, no special writing, just simple. But what caught me off guard was that I had been looking at something like this at a jewelry store a few days ago. I remember standing in front of a display case, looking at necklaces. I don't usually buy jewelry for myself, but something about that one caught my eye. I hadn't even touched it, though. I hadn't picked it up. I hadn't even gone inside the store. I just walked by the window and glanced at it for a few seconds, that was all. I could feel my pulse quicken, and I suddenly felt very exposed. Someone had been watching me, had seen me standing outside that store, and had somehow known that I looked at that necklace. But how? I didn't recognize the handwriting. I didn't recognize the necklace. And there was no way to know who would have seen me. I stood there in my doorway, the package still in my hands, unsure of what to do. The air around me felt colder. The package was warm, but the more I stared at the necklace, the colder I felt. It wasn't just the fact that someone knew where I had been. It was the realization that someone was out there, watching me, paying attention to what I did. I was about to close the door when I noticed something else. At the very bottom of the package, underneath the velvet pouch, was a small slip of paper. I pulled it out and unfolded it slowly, my hands trembling now. It said, "I'm glad you like it. I'll be seeing you soon." That was it. No name, no contact information, just those few words. I felt my stomach drop. The words were so casual, so assured. It didn't feel like a prank anymore. It felt like someone knew me. Someone who had been watching me. Someone who had been following me. I immediately looked out the window, scanning the street. My car was parked outside, but there was no one around. No one was walking on the sidewalk, and nothing seemed out of place. But the words echoed in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been standing right there, watching me receive that package. I rushed inside, locked the door, and sat down at the kitchen table. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to tell. Should I call the police? I didn't know if it was even worth it. It didn't feel like a crime had been committed, just an unsettling experience. But the note, it was a threat, wasn't it? Whoever had sent it clearly knew something I didn't. I spent the rest of the day obsessing over it. I couldn't focus on anything. I kept checking the locks on my doors, kept looking out the window to see if anyone was walking by. I kept thinking about the note, about the words, about the way I felt when I read them. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was like I wasn't alone anymore, like someone had a window into my life that I didn't know about. That night, I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. I kept hearing noises outside, distant sounds of cars or footsteps, but every time I checked, there was nothing. I kept imagining someone standing at the edge of the street, waiting for me to make a move. The anxiety got worse the longer I stayed in the house. I locked every window, double-checked the door, and even turned on the security system. It wasn't until the next morning that I finally made the decision to call the police. I explained everything about the package, the note, and the necklace. The officer I spoke to was professional, but I could tell he didn't think it was serious enough to act on. He told me to report any further incidents and to be cautious, but that was it. He didn't seem concerned. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but their indifference made me feel even worse. I knew this wasn't over. I didn't know who was watching me or why they were doing this, but I couldn't help feeling like this was just the beginning. It was as if I had been marked, like the package had been the first step in something bigger. For the next few weeks, nothing else happened. I stayed inside more than usual, made sure to avoid the street where I had been seen, and watched for any strange behavior. I still couldn't stop thinking about that necklace, though. I didn't wear it. I never did. It sat in my drawer, untouched, like a reminder that I wasn't safe, that someone out there knew where I went, what I did, and who I was. Then, one evening, about a month later, I received another package. This time, it wasn't a necklace. It was a small box with a simple note inside. I missed you. That was the moment I knew for sure. The person watching me wasn't going away. I couldn't ignore it any longer. Something was going to happen, and I wasn't ready for it. It was about 3 in the morning when I saw him. I had been driving for hours, the long stretch of highway ahead of me empty and desolate, just the hum of the engine and the occasional flicker of headlights from passing cars. The road had been straight for miles, and I could feel my eyelids getting heavy, the kind of tiredness that you can only get from driving long distances at night. I had left my friend's place in the city and was on my way back home, a good few hours ahead of me. The weather was clear, no rain or fog, but the night was still. Too still, actually. I hadn't passed another car for a while, and the silence was starting to feel a bit eerie. I thought about pulling over to get some coffee at a gas station up ahead, but I didn't want to waste time. I was tired, but I was close. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but as I got closer, I saw that it was a person, standing on the side of the highway with a thumb out. It was strange to see anyone out there, especially at this hour. No one should be on this stretch of road at this time. There wasn't even a town for miles. But I had always been the kind of person who couldn't just leave someone stranded, no matter how late or how far out of the way they were. I slowed down as I approached, and the figure stepped closer to the road, his thumb still out. I stopped beside him, rolled the passenger side window down, and called out. "Need a ride?" The guy nodded slowly, his movements stiff, almost too stiff, like he wasn't sure if he wanted to get in or not. He was tall, probably in his mid-30s, with scruffy brown hair and a worn-out jacket that didn't look like it'd keep anyone warm on a cold night like this. He didn't say anything, just nodded again, then opened the door and climbed in. I made a quick glance at him as he settled into the seat. His face was pale, his eyes wide but not in a way that seemed nervous. He just stared ahead. There was something off about him, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Maybe it was just how tired I was, or maybe it was the isolation of the road messing with my head. Still, I tried to make conversation. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to break the silence. I always try to be friendly with hitchhikers. You never know who they are, but a little kindness goes a long way, right? He didn't answer. I glanced at him again, but he was still staring straight ahead, his hands folded in his lap. The silence wasn't uncomfortable at first, but after a while, it started to feel heavier, like there was something pressing down on me. His lack of response wasn't weirding me out yet, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I kept my eyes on the road, my knuckles gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. I cleared my throat, trying again. "You been out here long?" Nothing. It was like he hadn't even heard me. I glanced at him again. His face was still turned forward, but there was something odd about the way his head was tilted. It was almost like he was craning his neck to keep his eyes locked on the road. I couldn't tell if he was just awkward or if there was something else going on. Maybe he was just tired too. I drove on for a while in silence, just the low hum of the tires on the road, and the occasional flicker of light from my headlights catching the occasional tree or sign. The feeling in the car kept getting worse though. The longer I drove, the more I started to feel like something wasn't right. I couldn't see his face now, but the air around me seemed heavier, like I was being watched in a way that made the hairs on the back of my neck prickle. I couldn't take it anymore. I glanced over at him, trying to get a read on his face. And that's when I saw it. He was staring right at me. His eyes were wide open, and his mouth, oh God, his mouth was spread into the widest, most unnatural grin I've ever seen. His teeth were too white, too sharp. It wasn't a smile. It was something else entirely. A smile would have been normal. This was wrong. I swerved a little on the road, but I quickly corrected myself. I tried to act like nothing happened, like maybe I just misread it. But I couldn't get my eyes off him. His grin was still there, stretching wider now. It didn't make any sense. How could someone look so calm and so wrong at the same time? I took a deep breath and turned my attention back to the road, trying to focus. But now, every passing second felt like an eternity. I wanted to say something. Ask him why he was acting like this, ask him what was going on, but every time I thought about it, the words wouldn't come. I kept looking at him from the corner of my eye, watching as his expression stayed frozen, that unnatural grin never leaving his face. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, growing louder, my chest tightening. I wanted to pull over, tell him to get out, get away from me. But the road was dark. No lights, no cars, just a lonely stretch ahead. What if something happened if I stopped? What if he wasn't the only one out there? And then, the thing that made it worse, he still didn't speak. Not a single word. He just kept staring at me, smiling like he knew something I didn't. He didn't even blink. His eyes were locked on me the whole time, no break, no relief. I could feel the tension in the air, the pressure building, and my grip on the steering wheel was white-knuckled. I was seconds away from telling him to get out, to stop the car and get away from me, when the road ahead finally opened up into a small gas station. I pulled in so quickly that the tires squealed. Without thinking, I threw the car into park and immediately jumped out, my legs shaky. I didn't even care that I left the door open, just that I needed to get away. I turned and looked back at the car. He was still sitting there. His head tilted forward slightly, that same grin still plastered across his face. His eyes never left mine. I slammed the door behind me and ran into the gas station without looking back. The attendant gave me a weird look when I rushed in, but I didn't care. I stood there, trying to catch my breath, telling myself that maybe I had just been paranoid. I went to the counter to pay for some coffee, trying to act normal, but my mind was racing. When I looked out the window, the car was gone. No sign of the man, no car, nothing. The road was empty again, just like before. But the feeling, the weight in my chest, it didn't go away. I haven't picked up a hitchhiker since that night. I still don't know who he was, or why he looked at me like that. And every time I drive down that stretch of highway, I can't help but look over my shoulder. It was a little after midnight when I left work. The parking lot was almost empty, just a few scattered cars and the yellowish glow from the streetlights making everything look a little eerie. I had stayed late to finish some reports, and by the time I finally walked outside, the building was quiet, the kind of silence that makes you notice your own footsteps. I made my way to my car, unlocking it with the button on my key. I was exhausted, my brain foggy from staring at a screen for too long, and all I could think about was getting home, taking a hot shower, and going to bed. I pulled the door open, tossed my bag into the passenger seat, and slid behind the wheel. I didn't waste time. I locked the doors the second I got in, just like I always did, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot. The roads were nearly empty. I barely saw another car as I drove, just the occasional headlights in the distance. It was a quiet drive, the kind where you go on autopilot, barely aware of the turns because you've taken them 1,000 times before. About 10 minutes in, I glanced up at the rearview mirror out of habit. And that's when I saw it. A shadow in the back seat. Just for a second. A shape, low, like someone trying to stay out of sight. My stomach dropped so fast it made me dizzy. My first thought was that I was imagining things. I had to be. My brain was tired. The light was playing tricks on me. But I couldn't stop myself from glancing up again, and this time I saw it move. Someone was in my car. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. I had locked the doors. I was sure of it. I always did. Had they been inside when I got in? How? My car wasn't big. I would have noticed, wouldn't I? My breath came faster. I kept my eyes on the road, afraid to turn around, afraid of what I'd see if I did. My skin felt too tight, my pulse pounding in my ears. Think. I had to get out. I had to get somewhere safe. But where? There was nothing around but dark, empty streets. I could barely see another car in the distance. No stores open this late, no gas stations nearby. Just silence and pavement stretching ahead. I swallowed hard and forced my voice to stay even. "Hey," I said, barely above a whisper. "I know you're there." Nothing. The back seat was silent. No movement. No sound. I tried again, louder this time. "If you don't get out, I'm driving straight to the police station." Still nothing. I gritted my teeth and flicked my eyes back to the mirror. The shape was still there, hunched low, too still. It didn't make sense. Why weren't they doing anything? No demands, no threats, just silence. A cold sweat broke out down my spine. My hands felt slick on the wheel. And then, finally, movement. Slow. Deliberate. I heard the quietest shift of fabric, a breath, the sound of weight repositioning. I didn't dare turn around. I just kept driving. Then, a voice. Low, calm, almost conversational. "Don't stop the car." It was a man's voice. I couldn't place the age, but something about it made my skin crawl. Too calm. Too controlled. I swallowed hard. My throat was dry. "What do you want?" My voice came out shakier than I wanted. He didn't answer. Just sat there, watching me. I forced my eyes to stay on the road, my mind racing through options. If I slammed on the brakes, would it give me enough time to get out? What if he had a weapon? I didn't know if he did. I didn't want to find out. Up ahead, I saw a stoplight, still a good distance away. If I slowed down too much, he could grab me before I had a chance to run. If I kept going, I'd be driving aimlessly, alone with him in my car. My heart was hammering. I needed a plan. Then I saw it, headlights. A car was pulling out of a side street up ahead, merging onto the road in front of me. I didn't think. I sped up, closing the distance, getting as close as I could to the other car. If I could get their attention, maybe. Don't do that. The voice behind me was sharper now. I ignored it. I flicked my headlights off, then back on. Once. Twice. A signal. Maybe they'd notice. Stop it. The voice was colder now. Clipped. I could hear the shift of weight, the creak of the seat. He was getting ready to move. The other car didn't react. They probably thought I was some impatient driver trying to get them to speed up. I tried again, flashing my brights this time. And then I heard it, a quiet click. Not from the dashboard. Not from anything I touched. From behind me. Metal. A knife. A gun. Something. My stomach turned to ice. Take the next right, he said. I didn't answer. My mouth was dry, my tongue heavy. The turn was coming up fast. My brain screamed at me to keep going, to speed up, to do anything but what he wanted. Then another set of headlights. A gas station just ahead. Bright lights, security cameras. People. I didn't think. I yanked the wheel and swerved into the lot, slamming the brakes so hard the tires screeched. Before the car even stopped moving, I threw the door open and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't breathe. I just sprinted toward the doors, past the gas pumps, past the parked cars. My legs burned, my chest tight with panic. I burst inside, gasping, wild-eyed. The cashier jumped, startled. Call the police, I choked out. He stared at me for a second, then grabbed the phone. I turned back toward the lot, heart hammering. My car was still running, the driver's side door wide open. The back seat was empty. I never saw him get out. Never heard the door open. But he was gone. There was always this one rule at camp that nobody really questioned. Don't go near the maintenance shed behind the mess hall. It wasn't locked or anything, but all the counselors made it clear it was off limits. Some said it was because of dangerous tools or old chemicals. Others just warned it was creepy and no one should be near it after dark. We all just accepted it, like how you accept some weird rule a parent gives you without asking why. I was about 15 and a counselor myself by then, which meant I was supposed to be the one enforcing rules. But honestly, I didn't think much about that shed until one night that changed everything. That summer had been uneventful. I'd been working the late shift, cleaning up after dinner with a few campers still milling around. The camp was tucked into a dense forest, so by 9 or 10 p.m. it got dark fast, and the only light came from the porch lamps near the mess hall. Most kids were already in their cabins by then, buzzing with tired energy or falling asleep. I was wiping down tables when I noticed something odd out the window. One of the other counselors, Rick, a guy who was usually pretty friendly and jokey, was walking with one of the younger campers, Tim, toward the maintenance shed. It felt strange because no one ever went near that place, especially not with campers. Rick's arm was around Tim's shoulder, like he was guiding him, but Tim didn't seem to be struggling or scared. They just walked slowly, almost like they were talking quietly. The shed was just a few steps from the mess hall, so I could hear the faint scrape of the shed door swinging open. Then I noticed Rick came back out alone. No Tim. My heart started pounding, but I told myself Tim probably just slipped away or was hiding somewhere as a prank. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, trying to call Tim's name. No answer. I looked around, flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. Nothing. I went back inside and told Rick, casually, like maybe he'd seen Tim and sent him off somewhere. He just shrugged and said Tim had gone back to his cabin earlier, which didn't make sense because I'd just seen them walk toward the shed together. The next hour was filled with this weird tension. I checked the cabins. All the kids were there, Tim included, asleep like nothing had happened. I asked him next day if he remembered going near the shed with Rick. He just blinked and said no. I started paying closer attention after that. Over the next few days, I noticed little things about Rick that were off. Like how sometimes he'd be gone for a few minutes and come back smelling faintly like gasoline or something metallic. Once I heard him talking on the phone in hushed tones, saying things that didn't make sense, something about getting it fixed and making sure no one finds out. Then there were the nights. I worked late almost every night, and sometimes I catch glimpses of Rick near the shed, moving things around or talking softly to himself. Other counselors joked that he was just cleaning or doing his maintenance duties, but none of us were supposed to go in there. And it never seemed like normal work, more like he was hiding something. One night, I decided to follow him. He left the mess hall after lights out, just before midnight. I stayed back, watching from the shadows near the cabins. He moved slow, careful. When he got to the shed, he fumbled with the lock for a long time, finally opening the door and stepping inside. I waited, heart in my throat, shining my flashlight over the shed door cracks. After maybe 15 minutes, the door creaked open and Rick stepped out alone. Again. No one else. But this time, I saw something in his hand, a small bundle wrapped in a tarp. He carried it like it weighed a lot. I wanted to call out, stop him, but I was frozen. What if it was nothing? What if I was imagining things? Rick slipped away into the woods behind the camp, and I didn't follow. I just stood there, breathing hard, the night thick with silence except for the crickets. The next day, I told the camp director what I'd seen, hoping for some kind of explanation. He got weirdly defensive and brushed it off, saying Rick was probably doing some late repairs and I shouldn't worry. That didn't sit right with me. I started asking around quietly, trying to piece together Rick's background. No one really knew much. He'd been hired just that summer, and records about him were sparse. No past camps, no references anyone could verify. It felt like he appeared out of nowhere. Then the camp owner announced that Rick was leaving early, taking personal reasons. No one asked questions. I still couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened in that shed. That night when Tim disappeared and Rick came back alone, the weight of it settled in my stomach. Years later, I looked up the camp online and found old staff lists, and Rick's name was nowhere to be found, no official record at all. I checked with some former staff members I still talk to, and none of them ever heard of Rick. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that shed, and how something was hidden there, something no one wanted anyone to find. And Tim? He never mentioned that night or that walk. Like it never happened. We had been driving for hours. The sun had gone down, and the road was dark except for our headlights cutting through it. Nothing but fields and trees on either side. No streetlights, barely any cars. Just miles and miles of nothing. It was my idea to take the back roads. It seemed like a good plan at first, save time, avoid traffic, but now, sitting in the passenger seat while Nate drove, I was starting to regret it. The gas station was the first place we had seen in a while. A small, rundown building with a single flickering light over the pumps. No other cars, No one inside that I could see. We should fill up, I said. Nate pulled in, killing the engine. You go, he said. I'll stay with the car. I grabbed my wallet and got out. The air was cold. The kind that felt too still, like the world was holding its breath. I hurried inside. The place was worse up close. A dull hum from the old freezer in the corner, a guy behind the counter staring down at something, barely acknowledging me. Shelves mostly empty. No music playing, just the buzzing lights overhead. I walked up to the counter. 20 on pump 2. The guy barely looked at me. He nodded, rang it up. His nails were dirty. His hands were rough, like he worked outside a lot. His shirt had some kind of logo on it, too faded to read. I paid in cash. When I stepped back outside, the cold hit me again. The air smelled like oil and dust. Then I stopped. The car was gone. I blinked, confused. Looked around like maybe I was missing something. But there was nothing. Just the cracked pavement, the empty road stretching out in both directions, and the gas pump where we had been parked. Nate was gone. My first thought was that he was messing with me. That he moved the car, parked around the side, waiting to jump out and laugh. Nate? No answer. I walked a few steps forward, listening. The silence pressed in. The only sound was the faint buzzing from the light overhead. Then I saw it. His phone, lying face down on the pavement near the pump. I felt a cold weight drop into my stomach. Nate never left his phone. He was always on it, always checking something. I bent down and picked it up. The screen was cracked. I turned, looking back toward the station. The guy inside was still behind the counter, not looking out, not paying attention. If he had seen something, he didn't seem to care. I checked the road again. Nothing. No headlights in the distance. No movement. It was like Nate and the car had just vanished. I swallowed. My mouth was dry. I tried to think. Maybe he left. Maybe he drove off and his phone fell out. Maybe. No. That didn't make sense. He wouldn't have just left me here. I clicked on his phone. No password. His last open app was messages. The last text sent was from him to me. Don't come back to the car. I felt my body go rigid. My breath caught in my throat. The timestamp was 1 minute ago. I looked up, heart pounding. The road was still empty. The night was still quiet. I turned and walked fast back to the gas station. The guy behind the counter finally looked at me. Something wrong? He asked. I hesitated. My instincts were screaming at me to lie. Yeah, I said. I think I left my wallet inside. His eyes stayed on me for a second too long. Then he shrugged and looked back down at whatever he was doing. I moved toward the back of the store, past the coolers, past the racks of half-stocked snacks. Nate's text kept flashing in my mind. Don't come back to the car. Then where was he? My hands were shaking. I texted back. Where are you? No response. I looked around, mind racing. If something happened to him, where would he go? If he was in trouble, would he have run? Then I noticed something. A door in the back. Employees only. I didn't think. I just moved. I pressed against the wall and listened. The hum of the freezers, the faint crackle of a radio somewhere. And something else. A sound just beneath it. A shuffle. A thump. Something or someone was back there. I texted again. "Are you here?" A second later, I heard the faintest buzz of a phone. Right behind the door. My body moved before my mind caught up. I grabbed the handle and pushed. It wasn't locked. The door swung open and I stepped inside. It was dark. Cramped. A storage room cluttered with boxes. The air was musty, thick. Then I saw him. Nate was sitting on the floor, arms tied behind his back, mouth covered with duct tape. His eyes went wide when he saw me, shaking his head fast, panicked. Before I could react, something slammed into my back. I stumbled forward, catching myself against a shelf. The guy from the counter. He had grabbed me, but I twisted away, heart hammering, adrenaline kicking in. He reached again, but I ducked. My foot hit a loose can on the floor, and it rolled. He lunged. I grabbed the closest thing, some kind of metal tool, a wrench maybe, and swung. It connected with his arm, and he grunted, stumbling back. I didn't stop. I swung again, this time at his face. He let out a yell, staggering into the shelves. I turned, grabbed Nate, yanked at the tape around his wrists. My fingers were slick with sweat, shaking too hard, but it peeled away. He ripped the tape from his mouth. Run. We bolted. Out the door. Through the store. The guy was groaning behind us, cursing, but we didn't stop. The second we hit the parking lot, I saw it, our car. Pulled around the side, passenger door open. We dove in. Nate turned the key, the engine roared, and we peeled out so fast the tires screeched. I looked back once. The guy was standing outside the gas station, watching us go. Blood running down his face. We didn't stop driving. Didn't talk. Just kept going, down that empty road, the dark stretching ahead. I don't know how he got Nate. I don't know what he was planning. But I know this. If I had gone back to the car like I was supposed to, I wouldn't be here to tell you this. I noticed it first when I was coming up the stairs. A smell. It wasn't strong at first, just something off, like old garbage or wet clothes left too long. The kind of smell that sticks in the air. At first, I thought it was just the hallway. The building wasn't new, and people left their trash out sometimes. But after a few days, it got worse. It was coming from the unit next door. I didn't know the guy who lived there. I had only seen him a couple of times in the hall, never talked to him. His mail piled up in the slot sometimes, but he always took it before it got too much. I hadn't seen him in a while. I knocked on his door one evening. No answer. The smell was worse up close. It wasn't just garbage. It was something rotting. I didn't know what to do. It felt weird to call anyone over a smell, but it was bad enough that I didn't want to be in my own place. I tried ignoring it for another day, but that night, I heard something. A sound from the other side of the wall. Not footsteps. Not voices. Just a faint shuffle. Like something moving. The next morning, I called the landlord. I told him I was worried, that no one had seen the guy in a while, that something smelled bad. He came by that afternoon with a key. We stood outside the door, and he knocked. "Hello? Anybody home?" Nothing. He knocked again, louder. Then he used the key. The door stuck at first, like something was pressed against it. He shoved it harder, and it opened. The smell hit us both like a wall. The place was a mess. Not just normal messy, but wrong. The lights didn't work. There was food on the counter, half-eaten, covered in mold. A plate sat on the floor like someone had left it there mid-meal. The couch cushions were ripped, like someone had dug through them. And the smell, it was coming from the kitchen. The landlord covered his nose and stepped inside. I followed, trying not to gag. The fridge door was open, the inside black with rot. Meat left out, long past spoiled. Flies buzzing. But there was no sign of the guy who lived there. No one's been here in a long time, the landlord said. He walked through the apartment, checking the bedroom, the bathroom. Nothing. The bed was made, the shower dry. It didn't make sense. Then he stopped. At the far end of the hallway, near the bathroom, was a door I hadn't noticed before. It was small, set low to the ground, like a maintenance hatch. The landlord frowned. What the hell? He reached down and pulled. The door popped open, revealing a dark crawl space. The smell rushed out, thick and awful. And inside, something moved. I stepped back fast. The landlord aimed his flashlight inside. There was a shape in there. A person, hunched, facing the back wall. Knees pulled up, body still. Then they turned. The face was pale, sunken. Eyes too wide, unblinking. Hair stringy, matted. They had been living there. The landlord cursed and stumbled back. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd be sick. The person, whoever they were, didn't move at first. Just stared at us. Then, slow and stiff, they crawled forward. I grabbed the landlord's arm. Close it. He slammed the door shut, breathing hard. His hands were shaking as he fumbled for his phone. I couldn't stop looking at the door. It had no lock. I don't remember what happened after that in detail. The police came. They opened the crawl space again, but it was empty. Whoever had been in there was gone. They found signs that someone had been living there for a while. A blanket. Empty food containers. Scraps of paper with handwriting that didn't make sense. The tenant who rented the apartment had moved out months ago. So whoever had been there, they weren't supposed to be. I moved out a week later. I still have nightmares about that face. I got home a little later than usual. Work had been a mess, and all I wanted was to sit on my couch, eat something, and not think for a few hours. The hallway smelled the same as always, a mix of someone's bad cooking and old carpet. I reached my door, unlocked it, and stepped inside without thinking. But something felt off. I didn't see it right away, but I felt it. Like stepping into a room where someone had just been talking, and they all went silent. I dropped my keys on the table. They made a different sound than usual. A duller thud. Then I looked around. The couch was there, but not where it should be. It was pushed back, angled slightly wrong. The coffee table was missing its usual stack of mail. The TV remote wasn't where I always left it. I turned to the kitchen. A dish sat in the drying rack. I hadn't used any dishes. The fridge was closed, but I swear it had been opened just a crack when I left that morning. I took a step back toward the door, my breath suddenly heavy. My heart was picking up speed, but my brain wasn't catching up yet. Something wasn't right. Then I looked down. The rug. It wasn't mine. Same pattern, same colors, but different. The lines were thicker. The blue was duller. My stomach twisted. I turned toward the bedroom. The door was open. It was always closed when I left. I moved toward it, slow. The bed was made, but wrong. My sheets, but tucked in tighter than I ever did. My nightstand was empty. No phone charger, no book. The closet door was open just a little. I had left it shut. I stepped back. My body was screaming at me to run, but my brain was still catching up. Then it hit me. The key. I had unlocked the door. The lock had turned like normal. But this wasn't my apartment. I reached for my pocket, fumbling for my phone. My fingers were shaking, making it hard to open the screen. I had to get out. My feet felt like they weren't working right as I backed toward the door. I kept waiting to hear something, see something, a shadow, a creak of the floor, a breath that wasn't mine. I reached for the doorknob. Then I heard it. A click. Knock from the bedroom. From behind me. I turned my head just a little. The bathroom door. It had been open before. Now it was closed. I hadn't heard it move. Someone was in there. I couldn't breathe. My fingers gripped the doorknob so hard it hurt. I twisted it slowly, trying not to make a sound. My body was shaking. Then, the bathroom door handle turned. Fast. I yanked the door open and ran. I didn't look back. My feet barely touched the ground as I tore down the hallway. I could hear something behind me, footsteps, movement, something, but I didn't stop. I reached the stairwell and sprinted down, taking the steps 3 at a time, my breath coming too fast, my heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't stop until I was outside, in the parking lot, under the streetlights. I turned back. The door to my building was still open. No one came out. I stood there, gasping, staring up at the windows. One of them was mine, but I didn't know which one anymore. I was in town for work, just a 2-night stay at a small hotel off the highway. It wasn't anything fancy, just a place to sleep between meetings. The hallway smelled like old carpet, and the ice machine was way at the end, near the stairwell. I wasn't planning to leave my room that night, but around 11:30, I wanted something cold to drink. I grabbed the ice bucket, slid on my sneakers, and stepped outside. The hallway was quiet. The only sound was the low hum of vending machines down the hall. I walked past a couple of closed doors, but it felt like I was the only one on the floor. The ice machine was tucked into a little alcove near the exit. I filled the bucket, listening to the cubes drop, then turned back. That's when I saw him. A man. At the far end of the hall. Just standing there. He wasn't moving, not even shifting his weight. Just standing too still, arms at his sides, watching me. I froze. I couldn't make out his face well from that far, but I could tell he was older. Maybe 50s. Dark clothes, a jacket, tall. I glanced at the doors near him, trying to figure out which room was his. None of them were open. I didn't want to turn my back, but I couldn't just stand there either. I took a step, then another, walking like everything was normal. His head tilted slightly, like he was listening. I passed the elevator, just a few doors from my room now. My hand tightened around the ice bucket. It felt stupidly small. If I had to, could I swing it hard enough to do anything? I reached my door, slid the key card in. The light blinked red. Not now. I tried again. Red. I swallowed. My hands were shaking. I forced myself to breathe to steady my grip. Another try. Green. I pushed inside fast, locking it the second it shut. I stood there, heart slamming against my ribs, ice cubes shifting in the bucket. I didn't check the peephole. I didn't want to know if he was closer. I barely slept. The next morning, I went to the front desk. I felt stupid saying anything, but I asked anyway. "Hey, is there anyone else staying in my hall?" The woman at the desk frowned. She checked something on her screen, then looked up. "No," she said. "You're the only one on that side." It was one of those nights where the office felt emptier than usual. Everyone had left, and I was just wrapping up some last-minute paperwork. My boss had been pushing hard for us to meet deadlines, so I ended up staying way longer than planned. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I didn't mind the quiet either. It's a big office building, and at night, the silence gets heavy. It's almost like the walls themselves are holding their breath. The building's lights hummed overhead, and the sound of my keyboard clicking felt louder than it should have. I'd been working for hours, and when I finally glanced up from my computer, the clock read 11:45 p.m. I sighed and started gathering my things. I had just stood up to leave when I heard it. A door. It wasn't a loud bang or anything dramatic, but it was distinct enough to pull me out of my thoughts. I paused, my hand still holding my jacket, listening. The sound came from down the hall, near the storage rooms, where the office supplies are kept. The door had opened and then closed again. My heart started to beat a little faster. No one was supposed to be here. I knew for sure. I had walked past every office on my way to the break room earlier, and the lights were all off. There was no sign of anyone. I grabbed my phone and checked the time again, 11:47 p.m. I hadn't heard anyone walk by, no footsteps, no voices. I stood there for a minute, holding my breath. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine, but it wouldn't go away. Finally, I decided to check it out. I grabbed my keys from the desk and walked cautiously toward the hallway where I had heard the noise. The hall was dark except for the dim emergency lights near the bathrooms. My shoes clicked loudly on the tile floor. I walked past the storage rooms first, checking the empty hallways. The doors to the offices were closed, just as they had been when I come in. Nothing seemed out of place, but that feeling in my chest, that tightness, wouldn't ease up. I was almost at the break room when I heard another sound. A rustling, just around the corner. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. There was no reason anyone should be in the building, and yet it felt like something was waiting. I slowly backed up and reached for my phone to call security, but my hands were shaking. It took me a moment to type the number in. I didn't even hear the door open this time, but I felt it. I felt a change in the air, like something had shifted. I turned back toward the hallway, peering down the dark stretch. A few seconds later, a flicker of light caught my attention from the security cameras above. The monitor in the lobby. I had to see if the cameras had caught anything. I stepped back and walked quickly to the lobby. The security footage system was old, and it was slow, but it worked fine for these purposes. I brought up the live feed and hit rewind, skipping back a few hours. I watched the footage of the front doors. At first, there was nothing. Just the empty parking lot, no cars. Then, at 10:32 p.m., a figure appeared in the frame. A man. He was wearing a dark hoodie, pulling it low over his face, and he walked slowly up to the front door. The camera was facing outward, so the footage didn't show his face, but it was clear he was sneaking inside. He barely touched the handle, almost like he knew exactly how to move without drawing attention. I froze as I watched him. He entered, the door closing softly behind him. The footage kept running. The man walked down the hall, and for a moment, he just stood there, looking around. Then he disappeared into the hallway near the storage rooms, the same direction I'd heard the door open. I watched in shock. But the thing that made my stomach twist was what happened next. The man never left. The hours ticked by. I saw him move from one room to another, always staying in the shadows. I saw him linger near the break room, the storage closet, and even the bathrooms. He never left. At 11:45 p.m., just minutes before I had heard the door, he was still in the hallway. I went cold, my hands shaking as I watched the man move from room to room in the footage, silently, like he was trying to find something, or maybe someone. I tried calling security, but no one picked up. I tried calling the police, but they didn't seem to take me seriously, telling me to check with the building manager. I didn't feel safe in the building. I didn't want to be anywhere near those hallways. I decided to leave, and as I gathered my things and rushed out to my car, I thought about how no one had ever noticed him. No one had mentioned anything about a man lurking in the building. How long had he been there? What was he doing? The next day, I went back to work. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me. The footage was real. I saw the man there on the cameras. But the worst part, no one could find him. The building manager came to me later that afternoon. "We've checked everything," he said. "There's no record of anyone entering. The footage is just a glitch. Something must have happened." I didn't buy it. There was no way it was a glitch. The man had been there. And if the cameras didn't catch him leaving, then where did he go? I tried to shake it off. I didn't want to keep thinking about it. But every time I walked through those hallways, every time I was alone in the office after hours, I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. The man had never left. And neither had the feeling that someone was still in that building. I still don't understand how it all happened, or how I let myself get so far into it before I realized something wasn't right. This wasn't a bad dream or a horror movie. It was real, and it terrified me. It started when I went shopping one afternoon. I just moved to a new town a few weeks earlier, so I was still figuring out where everything was. I went to a local department store that I'd seen a few times on my way home from work. It was a pretty big place, a little older, but seemed to have everything I might need. I wasn't planning to buy much, just a few basic items, shampoo, some new shoes, a couple of kitchen utensils, and I figured I could get in and out quickly. But as soon as I stepped inside, I noticed how quiet it was. The store was practically empty. I don't know why that struck me as strange, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Maybe it was just because it was a weekday afternoon, but it made me uncomfortable. The store just felt off. I grabbed a basket and started heading toward the toiletries section. That's when I saw the worker. He was standing at the end of one of the aisles, near the shelves of hand soap. He had a name tag on, but I didn't catch his name at first. He didn't seem busy or in a hurry. He just stood there, looking at me. I walked down the aisle and grabbed a few things, and as I turned to go down the next row, he appeared right in front of me. He wasn't close, just a few feet away, but it was enough to make me freeze for a second. "Can I help you find anything?" he asked, with a big smile. I told him I was fine, that I was just browsing. He nodded but didn't move, still watching me. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just doing his job. I grabbed a few more items, trying to focus, when I heard him again. This time, he was a little closer. "You sure you don't need help with anything?" he asked, his tone a little more insistent. I glanced at him, noticing he hadn't moved from the same spot. Something in the back of my mind told me it was odd. Most employees, when they ask if you need help, either walk away or start heading toward the section you need. But not him. He was standing there, still smiling, staring. I said, "No, thanks, I'm okay. Just looking." But he didn't let it go. He gave me a small nod and said, "Okay, but if you want, I can show you something in the back. It's quieter back there, less crowded." I was about to say something but stopped. My mind flashed to a warning I'd heard once about how some stores can have employees who try to get customers into less visible areas. It seemed harmless, but something about his smile, so wide, so eager, set off alarms in my head. I smiled back, a little more stiffly now, and said, "That's all right. I'm just about done." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he just stood there, watching me, his eyes a little too focused. For a second, I thought he might insist again, but then he simply nodded. "Okay. Let me know if you need anything." I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I was just overly cautious because I was in a new place. So I shrugged it off, grabbed the last few items I needed, and started heading for the self-checkout lanes. But just as I reached the counter, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around quickly, and there he was again. "Are you sure you're not here alone?" he asked, his voice low but clear. I stared at him, confused. "What? Are you here alone?" he repeated, his smile never faltering. "You didn't bring anyone with you?" My heart skipped a beat. I just stood there, frozen, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't asking in a friendly way anymore. His tone was more probing, almost unsettling. Yes. "I'm alone," I said, my voice sounding too loud in my own ears. He didn't say anything else. He just nodded, his smile still in place, then turned and walked off toward the back of the store. I stood there for a few moments, trying to make sense of it. The whole situation felt off. I didn't know why he was asking me such a strange question. I quickly paid for my things and left the store, still trying to shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. But as I was driving home, it hit me. What if I'd been wrong? What if he had been trying to get me somewhere? What if? I don't know. I wasn't the only target. When I got home, I decided to call the store. Maybe I was being paranoid, but I had to know. I dialed the number and asked to speak to the manager. After a brief wait, the manager answered. I explained everything that happened, how the employee had followed me around, how he had insisted on showing me a part of the store, and how he asked me if I was alone. I even mentioned how he seemed too focused on me, almost too eager. The manager was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and calm. "We don't have anyone on staff who matches that description," he said. I paused, confused. "What do you mean?" "He was wearing a name tag." The manager interrupted. "There's no one here who works that shift or matches that description. I don't know who you spoke to, but it wasn't one of our employees." I felt my stomach drop. How could that be? I knew what I saw. I had seen his name tag. He looked just like any other employee. The manager didn't say much after that. He asked if I wanted to report it formally, and I told him no, I just wanted to make sure it didn't happen again. He apologized and said they'd look into it. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like I was losing my mind. How could I have been so sure that he worked there, but now the manager was saying no one like him had been on the schedule? What if the guy was... what? What was he doing there? Who was he? I haven't gone back to that store since. I'm not sure if I will. I don't know if I'll ever understand what happened. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I didn't. But I can't shake the feeling that something about that man wasn't right. I never really thought much about the old camp photos, you know? Like, every year the camp would send out those cheesy group pictures with everyone lined up, smiling awkwardly in the sun or under the trees. I just looked at them like a kid with faces of friends, goofy poses, all that. But years later, when I was an adult and feeling kind of nostalgic, I decided to look them up online. Just curious what the old place looked like now, and to maybe find a photo with me in it. That's when I noticed something. At first, it was subtle. On the edges of the photos, behind the groups of campers and counselors, there was this man. He was always there. Not front and center, just standing off to the side or partially hidden behind a tree. I thought maybe he was a camp staff member or a volunteer who hung around but wasn't involved much. But there was something about the way he stood, too still, always looking straight at the camera with a blank expression. And no one ever seemed to acknowledge him. So I started looking at photos from every year I could find online. I'd been at that camp for 2 summers, so I checked the years before I even arrived, and the ones after I left. That guy was in every single photo. Same spot, same blank face. I even checked the camp's website to see if he was listed as staff. Nothing. No name, no mention of him anywhere. That was the start of it. It didn't feel like a creepy thing right away, just weird. I thought maybe he was some groundskeeper or a security person who always hung around but didn't interact with campers. But then I started remembering small things from my time there. Like how sometimes, at night, when the camp was supposed to be dead quiet, you'd hear footsteps out by the woods. Not the usual night sounds, these were heavy, deliberate. Not from the direction of the staff cabins or the road, but just wandering along the edge of the camp, like someone pacing. I remember once, near the end of my first summer there, I was sitting outside my cabin after lights out, reading with a flashlight. I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, just a dark shape standing beyond the tree line, watching. I blinked, looked again, and it was gone. I told a counselor the next day, but they brushed it off, said it was probably one of the older kids messing around. There was also this weird moment during a campfire one night. Everyone was roasting marshmallows, telling stories, when one of the counselors suddenly stopped talking and stared hard into the woods behind us. The campfire flickered and threw shadows around, but no one else seemed to see anything. Then he told us to get back to cabins early that night and not to go near the tree line. No explanation. The next day, a few kids mentioned seeing a man standing in the woods at odd times. No one knew who he was or why he was there. Counselors again said it was probably a ranger or someone checking the area, and not to worry. At the time, it was easy to ignore, but after seeing that man in every photo, I started piecing things together. There was no official record of him. No one seemed to want to talk about him. But he was definitely there, lurking on the edges. On my second summer, I got braver and tried to find out more. One evening, after everyone was supposed to be asleep, I snuck out and followed the edge of the woods, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever was making those footsteps. I walked quietly, heart pounding, trying not to breathe too loud. I thought I saw him once, a tall man in a dark jacket standing behind a cluster of pine trees. He didn't move, just watched. When I stepped closer, he disappeared like a shadow. I called out, but nothing. My friends said I was imagining things, but I knew I wasn't. Another thing that felt off was how sometimes the camp's usual noises would just stop. No crickets, no wind, no rustling leaves, just this heavy, suffocating silence. Like the woods were holding their breath. Then one night, the fire alarm went off for no reason. Everyone had to evacuate to the mess hall in the dark. While we were waiting, I saw that same man standing outside the window, looking in. The counselors didn't notice him at first, but when someone pointed him out, he vanished before they could get to the door. They said it was probably a prankster or someone from outside trying to scare us. The last night I was there, I stayed up late again. I was watching the woods from the porch of the cabin, thinking about all the times I'd seen that figure out there. Suddenly, I heard breathing behind me, low, steady. I spun around. No one. I thought I was alone. Then I felt it, a presence. Like someone standing just a little too close, but invisible in the dark. I grabbed my jacket and ran to the counselor cabin, pounding on the door. They looked at me like I was crazy, but the way I was shaking made them let me in. They checked around, but no one was there. Still, after that, the camp director decided to close the camp a week early. Years later, I searched again online, and the photos were still there, always with that man in the background. I never found out who he was or why he was there. No one I asked would talk about it. But every time I look at those pictures, I see him standing just outside the group, watching. I never went back to that camp, and I don't think I ever will. I worked as a counselor one summer at this little camp out in the woods. Nothing fancy, just cabins, a lake, a dining hall, and those old walkie-talkies they hand out to staff for emergencies. Most days were pretty normal. Kids running around, campfires, bad songs, that kind of thing. But the nights, well, that's when things started to get weird. We had cabins lined up in a row, and I was assigned to cabin 7 with 6 kids, all about 12 or 13. The walkie-talkies were supposed to keep us in touch with the main office or the other counselors, especially after lights out in case of emergencies. Usually, it was just static or nothing at all after midnight. But one night, around 11:30, I was lying in my bunk scrolling through my phone, no Wi-Fi, obviously, but I was trying to pass the time when I heard it. A whisper on the walkie-talkie. Just a faint crackle at first, like someone breathing close to the mic. Then I caught a name. Soft, barely audible. It sounded like Emily. I froze. Emily was one of the girls in my cabin, asleep maybe 10 feet away. I lifted the walkie up, thinking maybe some kid was messing with it, but the channel was supposed to be quiet at night. I whispered back, "Emily? Is that you?" No answer. Just static. I shrugged it off, told myself it was probably just radio interference. That happens, right? The forest, the hills, maybe another radio signal mixing in. But then it happened again the next night, around the same time. The walkie crackled, and I heard another name, Marcus. Another kid from my cabin. I sat up, heart starting to race a bit. I whispered into the mic, "Marcus." Again, no reply. Just static. I asked the other counselors if they heard anything on their walkies at night. None of them had. They laughed when I told them about the names, said maybe it was my imagination or interference from a nearby ham radio or something. That made me feel a little crazy. But I kept listening. Over the next few nights, I heard more names. Sophie, Jake, Lily. All kids from my cabin. And always just one name at a time. Whispered. So quiet, it was almost impossible to tell if it was a real voice or just noise. But the names were right. I tried to tell the camp director. She gave me the "you're tired" look and said maybe I was imagining things, or the walkie was malfunctioning. She said they ran checks, and everything was fine. One night, the whispers didn't stop. They kept coming, one after another, like a slow countdown. First Emily, then Marcus, then Sophie, and so on. I was wide awake now, gripping the walkie, staring into the dark cabin where the kids slept. I checked on them. All of them were there. Breathing, asleep, nothing wrong. But then the walkie started whispering a name I didn't recognize. It wasn't a kid in my cabin. It sounded older, more like a man's name, David. I paused, suddenly feeling really cold, like the air had dropped 10 degrees. I called out softly into the walkie, "Who's David?" No answer. I stood up, flashlight in hand, ready to check the grounds. That's when I noticed the other counselors' walkies were dead silent. No crackles, no voices. I told myself to calm down. I walked outside, around the cabin, flashlight sweeping over the trees. Nothing. Just the usual night sounds of crickets, leaves rustling. But then, about 20 feet from the cabin, I heard footsteps crunch on the dirt. Slow, deliberate. I froze and shone the light toward the sound. No one there. I walked closer to the wood's edge, trying to hear better. The footsteps stopped. Silence again. Back at the cabin, I checked the kids. Still asleep. I stayed up the rest of the night, clutching that walkie, waiting for whatever was next. The last night I was there, I heard the whispers again, but this time they were different. They weren't just names anymore, they were full sentences, faint and broken. Help me. Don't let him. Stay quiet. I pressed the talk button to respond, but didn't say anything. I was scared to make any noise, scared of whatever was out there. When morning came, I packed my stuff, told the director I was leaving early. She asked why, but I just said I wasn't feeling well. I still have that walkie-talkie somewhere, but I never turned it on again after that summer. I don't know who or what was whispering those names, but I'm sure it was someone watching, waiting, and using that static to get closer without being seen. I never really thought about it much until years later, scrolling through some old camp photos online. I grew up going to this summer camp every year, from like age 9 through 14, and the place was huge. Woods, cabins, a lake, all that classic camp stuff. What always stuck with me was this one counselor, Mike. He was my favorite. Easygoing, always joking around, never like the other counselors who sometimes seemed stuck up or serious. I remember him helping me learn how to row a canoe, and once he even stayed after lights out to fix my busted sleeping bag zipper. He just felt different in a good way. But when I looked through the camp's old group photos online, like the official ones they posted every summer and the rosters they uploaded from each year, Mike was nowhere to be found. No pictures, no staff lists, nothing. I showed some of the old friends I still talked to from camp, and they said they didn't remember any Mike either. I even messaged the camp admin on their website, asking about him, but they said no one by that name had worked there in years, or even visited. At first, I figured it was just a mix-up. Maybe Mike was a nickname, or maybe I remembered the name wrong. But I was sure it was Mike. His face, the way he smiled, how he wore that faded green camp jacket with the patch on the sleeve. It was all so clear in my memory. Anyway, this story happened one summer when I was about 12. The one time I actually got to spend more than a day with Mike. The camp was buzzing that week because it was the last one before they started renovating some of the cabins. I was in cabin 9 with some kids my age, and Mike was our counselor. We had a few group activities during the day, and Mike was usually the one leading the hikes or the campfire songs. He was easy to talk to, never pushed anyone too hard, and always listened. One evening, after dinner, Mike told us we could have some free time before lights out. Most kids went to the mess hall or the lake, but I decided to stay near the cabins and watch the sunset from the hill overlooking the camp. Mike followed me after a bit, sitting down quietly beside me on the grass. We talked about dumb stuff, music, summer plans, school, and for the first time, I felt like a kid who actually mattered. Then, about 20 minutes before dark, the wind started picking up. The sky got heavy and gray, and I could hear low thunder way off in the distance. Mike stood up and said we should probably head back to our cabin. On the way back, I noticed the woods sounded different. Usually, there were crickets or frogs, but this time, the sounds were muffled, like everything was holding its breath. The thunder was closer now, and the first drops of rain started to fall. When we got back, the cabin felt colder than usual, even though it wasn't late. Mike locked the door behind us, but I thought that was weird. Usually, they left the cabins unlocked until lights out. That night, the storm came in fast. Heavy rain, lightning that lit up the windows, thunder so loud it shook the walls. The power went out about an hour after lights out, and the whole camp was plunged into darkness. The emergency generator ticked on for some areas, but our cabin was dead silent. Mike handed out flashlights and told us to stay calm. We all sat in the main room, huddled under blankets, listening to the storm. The wind was howling, branches hitting the roof. I remember feeling safe with Mike there. Around midnight, I heard something outside. A soft knocking on the cabin door. Then again. It was faint but deliberate. Mike went over and peeked through the window. There was no one there, just the rain and dark. Probably just a branch, he said, but he looked tense. Then, we heard footsteps outside circling the cabin. Slow, heavy steps in the mud. Mike told us to stay quiet and not move. He grabbed his flashlight and opened the door just a crack. No one. I remember thinking he was brave, but the way he shut the door fast made me realize he was scared too. The footsteps kept going, fading into the woods. The next day, some counselors checked the perimeter but found no signs of anyone. The camp director said it was probably just some pranksters or drunks from the nearby road. But it didn't feel like that to me. The rest of the week went by, but I noticed Mike seemed distracted, like he was watching the woods a lot. One afternoon, I asked if he was okay. He smiled but didn't say much. The night before I left, I woke up because I thought I heard whispering. I got out of bed and peeked outside the cabin window. Mike was standing outside in the rain, staring toward the trees. He didn't notice me. I wanted to ask what was wrong, but I didn't. Instead, I watched until he turned and walked back inside. Years later, after I started wondering about Mike's absence in the camp records, I called some of the older staff who had been there when I was a kid. No one knew him. Some said they remembered a counselor with a different name working the cabins back then, but no Mike. I looked through old camp newsletters, message boards, even tried tracking down former campers online. Still nothing. I thought maybe Mike was just some temp or volunteer who wasn't officially on the books, but it didn't add up. How did someone spend a whole summer working with kids without any paper trail? The strangest part? I once asked a counselor who had been at the camp long before me about a green jacket with a patch. She said no one wore anything like that, at least not officially. It's like Mike was there and not there at the same time. I never told anyone else because it felt crazy. Like maybe I was just mixing up memories or inventing someone I wanted to believe in. But every now and then, when I think about those nights, the storm, the footsteps, Mike standing outside in the rain, I wonder if he was trying to protect us from something no one else saw. Whatever it was, I'm glad I never had to find out what it really meant. I had just moved into a small studio apartment 2 weeks ago. Nothing special, just one big room, a little kitchen off to the side, and a bathroom in the back. It was cheap, close to work, and quiet. The first thing I noticed was that some of my food kept disappearing. At first, I thought I was just forgetting I ate it. A granola bar missing here, a yogurt gone there. But then a full sandwich I made the night before wasn't in the fridge the next morning. I didn't eat it. I know I didn't. A few days later, I came home and smelled something weird. Like old clothes and sweat. I checked everywhere. Nothing. I even thought maybe something got caught behind the fridge. But it went away after a few hours. I started feeling like someone was watching me. Especially at night. I'd lie in bed and just feel it, like something was behind the wall. I barely slept. One night, I woke up to a small thump, like something falling gently on the floor. I froze and listened. Nothing after that. Just silence. The next day, I bought a small camera. One of those cheap ones you can hide on a shelf. I pointed it at the kitchen. I didn't really think I'd catch anything, I just needed to stop feeling insane. I set it up before bed. In the morning, I checked the footage on my phone. Most of it was nothing. Me getting a drink, brushing my teeth, turning off the lights. Then around 2:30 a.m., I saw something. The cabinet over the fridge opened. Slow. Quiet. A hand reached out. Then a head. A person. They crawled out. A man. Skinny. Dirty. He climbed down like he'd done it before. He didn't look around much. Just walked to the fridge, opened it, ate half a sandwich I'd left, drank from the milk carton, wiped his mouth on my towel. Then he walked over to my bed. I was in it. Asleep. He stood there, watching me. For 5, maybe 6 minutes. Then he turned around and climbed back up into the cabinet and shut the door behind him. I called the police shaking. They found the guy still in there. There were blankets, food wrappers, even a book. He'd been living above me. Probably the whole time. They took him away. I sleep with the lights on now. I keep a chair under the doorknob. I check the cabinets every night. I still don't know how he got in to begin with.